Yes, Olmec skylifters. Yo, we shift the galactic frame of the sky to line up the planets with the most high. From 6000 BC to 2012 AD, here we see the Milky Way converge in position. The solar gods emerge from the solstice meridian. You can see the reptilians trying to figure out how to stop Nibiru, cause they all know that they all through. When it do, return to see it matters, Merkabah. The long countdown dated back to Isabel, the Olmec skylifters showing you the pistol store straight from the head and the mouth of a jaguar. The Big Dipper region, they call it the polar, will merge with the head of a solar black god from the center of the Milky Way. The dawn of a new day like bird rules today. We don't play, we a cosmic civilization resurrected to rebirth our own nation. Just in time for the 13 moons. Man, we serious just like June the
My man. Okay. Ain't nothing going to stop this show. We lost the signal, but thanks for sticking in there with me. And I know we have some folks in the chat who migrated over to the new chat. We are back, and hopefully folks are tapped in, tuned in, staying tuned with us. Again, thank you, King Etznab, for your time and presence on the planet. I think we were going in maybe in some directions that the controllers of some of these networks may take issue with, and that's all right though. But that's what time it is. We're going to definitely push the boundaries as necessary, particularly in times like this when people, I mean, I'm certainly not inclined to just sit back idly while things are adjusting in such ways. Right. But nevertheless, grateful that we're here and still in this conversation. And that is some of your music, High Resonance. Just to point out, I want to encourage people to look in the show notes and go to number1music.com, n1w.com. I think the link is in the show notes for that, and people can get directly to your music there. And speaking of that, obviously that is highlighting the Olmec skylifters. Let's get back into that conversation, because when we talk about the Olmecs, people tend to think of antiquity. They tend to think of obviously the colossal heads that have been recovered at various sites. But I wonder how many people regard the ascendants that are here now. And I think that's the paradigm shift we're actually calling forward. I mean, that's one of the paradigm shifts I know that Dr. York was leading, for the culture, for the world, frankly. And it was a little bit much, obviously, for many people. People are afraid of change, But let's talk about that a little bit. How this restoration of the root of the source, of the mother culture, how that's coming around now, given what you've been doing the past several years, and how you see that really emerging and leading even.
Okay. Well, like I said, the voices coming back. It's echoing.
Yeah, I think I have you here in 2 instances logged in twice. I don't know, maybe there's I'm not sure how that happened. I got you in the studio twice here.
Okay. Yeah, because I was going.
Okay, that feels a little better. I don't hear the static right now.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, it's still. I'm not sure.
Okay, can you put your headphones on and try that one? Because then maybe if we could take it out of your home speakers and try it in the headphones, maybe. I'm not sure if that'll cancel the echo.
All right.
Check 1, 2.
It's still echoing.
It's still echoing. Yeah, there's a second. It looks like there's a second edition of you logged in here.
Okay, I guess.
Log out, log back in. We'll be right back.
All right.
And we're back, my
Yes,
brother.
sir.
Or do we have an echo now?
Nope, we
All
good.
right. Excellent. Excellent. All right. Perfect. So, yeah, let's pick up where we were going, man. Again, in terms of your leadership and what you're seeing emerging as it relates to indigenous peoples generally, frankly, because you're involved in a lot of movements that people might not be familiar with, but they certainly need to be familiar. So, share a little bit about that.
Okay, well, obviously, when we talk about the prophecies of 2012, there was a prediction that there would be a new world emerging, after 2012, and we would go into a new paradigm shift. And I've been at the forefront of that paradigm shift from the beginning, and it involved or entailed us moving into a new economic system that was a system from antiquity, which was the cooperative system, which was the original system. So I tell everybody that the original system of economics on the planet was a cooperative system. And then we moved from a cooperative system to a bartering system. And then we moved from a bartering system to a communist system. And then from a communist system to a capitalistic system. And now we're going forward to the cooperative system once again, which was the original system. And that system is now globally recognized. It's been globally recognized ever since the year 2012. A global co-op movement has been established with the International Co-op Alliance, the United Nations, and something called COPAC. Okay, so we are establishing a mission to build a better world. So you would see a lot of that um, on the IWB.coop website, where you'll see the slogan where we say "Build a better world." So it's about establishing and building a better world for our people, as we are in a time period where capitalism can no longer be of service to us, which is why so much conflict with capitalism, and it's perfect timing for us to be moving into a economic system that makes sense. And I've been at the forefront of that, establishing that on a global scale for the past 15 years in terms of the co-ops. And the United Nations recognized it in 2012. Now we have a global mission with the United Nations and the International Co-op Alliance to establish that new system, for indigenous peoples. And on April the 21st, we have what is known as the Indigenous Peoples Conference. It's the 24th session, which was established um, in 2007, where it was actually recognized by a number of countries. They have a permanent forum for us as indigenous peoples where our rights are protected, in the international global scope of things. And that is the place where many of our people should be now, is in the international world, and establish them in the indigenous status and international status, and then being on the right economic system, and also plugging into the movement for community development on a global scale, water, and the likes, for just global, worldwide nation building of autonomy and independence. And that's been the mission that I've been on it for the past 15 years.
So really, since 2010, I think that's when you did. Is that when you established
Yeah.
indigenouswaterbank.coop, or that's the website, but Indigenous Water Bank, correct?
Yes, the Indigenous Water Bank, IWB.coop, is the Indigenous Water Bank cooperative. And I established it in 2010, and that was 2 years before the 2012 opening of the cycle. So I wanted to
Mm.
kind of be ahead. We already knew about the 2012, just like the song you was playing, the Olmec Scholar.
Right, right. Going back to go forward though.
Right. So we that song you was playing, Olmec
Hmm.
Scholar, was done by myself, Taj, and Bilal in 2006.
Incredible. Okay, yeah, going back for
Mhm.
sure. 2025 International Year of Cooperatives. Talk a little bit about this global alliance that's emerging as a result of this. I mean, you started this effort really in 2012 at the UN level in collaboration there, and now here we are 13 years later. There's no coincidence, obviously, to the timing of the cycles. But talk about where that movement is this year. How is it being expressed around the world in terms of these communities really leveraging this, I suppose, this acknowledgement as 2025 being the year of international cooperatives?
Okay, well, let me start from the 2012. When we started in 2012, they granted us a full decade to establish the system and the
Mm,
infrastructure. So from 2012 to the year 2022. Okay, so they granted us a full decade of establishing this system. Okay, in 2023, they recognized that the system was very necessary, and it was a lot of co-ops being established and recognized by the International Co-op Alliance, and also in the United States, they call NCBA, National Cooperative Business Association. So it was being recognized that there were a number of co-ops that were being established under this infrastructure and this framework, and the United Nations saw it as the system of economics and business and the type of framework that the world actually needed. So we push for it being the original system of the original indigenous people and people worldwide. This was our system before the adoption of capitalism, and we already know that capitalism was going to collapse, it was going to fail, and it's not going to last much longer. So this is the system that we know that we need. Now it's about the people collaborating and cooperating. Now in 2025, they decided that they was going to grant us another international year of cooperatives. The first one was in 2012, and they gave us a decade of establishment. And then they saw the movement, the infrastructure, and then they started pulling it in as a part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Programs, because they saw the significance of it. And they saying, yes, this needs to be a system. This needs to be a global movement. This is the right path based upon how the U.S. economy is and how the economy is basically on a global scale,
hmm
and the collapsing of that. So I was at the forefront of making sure that different things were implemented, things were passed into law. And I started that, back in 2003. 2003 is when I started pushing real heavy for the co-op part, and then the indigenous peoples. Now, the indigenous peoples movement in 2003, that came from Dr. York in 1997. He put in the book, Let's Set the Record Straight. In the back of the book, he had these declarations that they was called drafted declaration on the rights of indigenous peoples. So when
hmm
I was in those drafted declarations, they were in draft form at the time for like 25 years, but they were not considered legal. So I was looking at them. I said, okay, well, I went online and I started pulling them online, and I put them in legal documents. So I said, well, somebody is going to have to make these articles legal. Somebody gonna have to make that happen. So I was the individual that did it for myself first in a document and got it annexed by the United States Department of State. Okay, and when they annexed those laws, it was legal for me to use at the time, but it still wasn't legal for everybody else. Right. So I was establishing everything with those articles in the world of banking, and I created something called a Worldwide Indigenous Congress. And I was doing treaties with different nations in different countries around the world. I was establishing treaties, and I said, okay, well, we need to have our own independent system. So I started sharing those articles and things with other indigenous tribes. Okay, now I said, but we still got to go to the United Nations. Before we went to the United Nations, it was me and this other guy. His name is Duamatev Tariq Unk. We was the only guys that was really like pushing these articles, right? And so we first we called the United Nations first, and we was asking them about the drafted Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. They were just saying, well, they're just in draft form, they're not legal, and you can't utilize them until they actually become legal. So they were saying that, well, we're going to be establishing a permanent forum for indigenous peoples, but the indigenous peoples got to come up and they got to start claiming that they're indigenous on the international level if they want this forum. So we was on the front line for that. So we was like, okay, well, we got to go and we got to establish this. So it was presented to the United Nations, and we're saying, okay, this is what we want. This is what we're looking for. So it was I think like 2005, 2006, and then 2007, the United Nations presented it to the world. They said, okay, 2007, we're presenting this indigenous peoples, these indigenous rights. And then most of the countries accepted it. I think it was like 4 countries that didn't, and the United States was one of those countries that didn't accept it. Okay, and then in 2010, they presented it again in 2010 while President Barack Obama was in office, and he signed it and he ratified it. And I was I was going back and forth to DC to make sure that these things were locked in, sealed up. And then they started something in the U.S. Congress where they started adopting the co-op system, co-op infrastructure, and they was rolling out a groundbreaking system. And it was being done with this guy. His name Shaka Fatah. He was a former senator, congressman, and he was very close friends with President Barack Obama at the time. Okay, they granted us in 2012, they granted us a conference in DC. All right, so I went to the conference in DC, and they had this book, and it was pretty expensive too to go there. But I was like, I don't care what it costs, we got to do it. So I was able to meet Shaka Fatah and them, and we had a conference, and I went to the credit union house, the White House and all of that stuff, and we had this co-op conference, and I got a video of the co-op conference where I was there, but we was focusing on getting these laws passed about co-ops. So Barack Obama, he was with it. He did the co-op laws, he did the indigenous peoples laws, and then he did laws on food security. Those were the 3 things that we felt that was very important at the time. So most people don't know that he did that because they're not in the new world or the new paradigm, so to speak. So when they look at the public politician, they be like, oh, well, he didn't do nothing. Well, he did those 3 things, which were very important things for the new paradigm.
So as it brings it to what we're looking at now currently, I mean, you were part of creating these precedents, these very important precedents that, as you said, beginning in 2005, even, really beginning in 97, like you were mentioning from Let's Set the Record Straight, when you were able to draw that out of the back of the book, the draft of the Indigenous Peoples' Rights, right, that initial draft document. And then you directly basically helped establish it. You took that and established it. So you really established a precedent of establishing that before other indigenous nations even had the agency to move on it, even decided to do it.
There was nothing established prior to me doing these things.
Right.
I looked at everything. There was no recognition of anything. There was no annexes. There was no legal. Everything was just in draft form when I started this.
Wow.
I was the first person to get it actually ratified and legally acknowledged and annexed. And then I was pushing on the United Nations level to make sure that everybody could have these rights as indigenous peoples, from that time period, because I felt like we needed to be established as indigenous people, and we need to have international law backing us, because that wasn't a thing prior to that. We was like, okay, you had all of the Indian removal acts and all these different things, Walter Plecker and all. I was looking at all the racism, the Dawes Roll, how they was taking natives' rights. But I said, well, we have to establish ourselves on an international level, before we can move the way that we need to move, and we need to be global. So I started viewing the world as a global system, a global infrastructure, and a global movement for indigenous peoples and the establishment of cooperatives.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. And again, by doing that, it seems the timing couldn't have been more perfect. I mean, you essentially indicated that 2012, I mean, that window opened, and then you were extended another 10 years to do such. Now, you're saying that this year also an extension has been afforded of another decade?
Yeah,
Is that
well,
essentially from this point forward?
they granted us a whole international year,
Okay.
like of co-op, like cooperative development. They said, okay,
Right.
well, let's make 2025 the international year of cooperatives, and let's see the co-ops unify and the people synchronize even more with the movement, because we had the decade of establishing it. After 2022, 2023 came, it wasn't like a lot of things going on, like the co-ops were established, but it wasn't anything being promoted, anything being talked about as far as the United Nations, the global scale. And then in 2024, they said, well, we think y'all should be granted another international year of co-ops. And then we will have forums at the United Nations, and we will let everybody know the co-op developments from different countries, and we had a conference earlier this year at the United Nations, and that's on the co-op website as well, where we had the earlier this year we had the co-op conference, and they had the people coming from different countries talking about the international co-op movement, because that's the move for us as we seeing the current public policy system collapse.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's one of the most striking things about what this is and the timing of what you're actually presenting to people, because it is demonstrating the wave of the future. You essentially predicted this previously. You saw what was forthcoming and were able to take action and create the structures to establish those rights to annex the land spaces. And I mean, even that leads to the IWB, the
Mm-hmm.
Indigenous Water Bank, correct?
Yeah, yes. I like when I first started, I was looking at all of the different things that had took place on Tamaray, because I was a
Mm.
part of those things, and I was seeing how things came down. And even during the time, I was telling everybody, I said, look, y'all, I think that we need international status, we need world status, we need global recognition. I say very similar to like what the Pope has, and I was studying international law at the time. I had studied the international law for like 13 years before I really even started implementation. But I was seeing that everything concerning human rights was under international law. Everything concerning indigenous rights was under international law. Everything concerning black nobility and royalty was under international law. And cooperative economics, international co-op systems. And I said we gotta learn international law, because that's where our real rights are. Our rights are not in local and domestic law. Our rights and power is in the international world. So I was, looking at different things concerning world court, and looking at how different families, banking dynasties and families were establishing themselves under international law, how diplomacy was established. And I said, that's the world, that's the lane that we got to be in, but I want to make it more well known. And when they came to Tamaray, after they had came and got Atumray in 2002, it was myself and the other guy. His name is Duamatev Tarif Unk. We were the only two people that had international status and international travel documents on a global scale. After they came with the news, the news media and all of that, and they wanted to interview us at the time, because we was into diplomatic immunity and diplomacy, and it's speaking the language, and I was saying that's the issue, because everybody was just so local and domestic, and all your rights are usually violated when you're just local and domestic, and you're not in that international scope international affairs, because I used to go, like, even here in Atlanta, go to the international affairs division, looking at, I would do complaints. Like, even when I would get into any kind of situation, I would make it an international incident. And I'm telling you, the results are totally different when you bring international law into effect with everything. And I started telling people that this is the missing piece. We need our indigenous status. We need international status. We need these credentials, and we need that type of security and protection, because they're not going to pay attention to anything unless it's an international incident. So everything that we do, we have to make it an international incident in order for the international bodies and powers, to come down on the local and domestic, because they got a lot of international treaties and things that I've seen, and I hold them to those kind of things. Like, so the multilateral treaty. So I read all of these different things that bond them to certain things. But the only way that we can be protected is we got to be outside of the local and domestic, and international law has to be in effect with everything that we do. And that's how it is. That's how I established everything, just studying law, like the private sector. Okay, the word private sector, if you legally look that up, it means you are part of the economy or industry that's exempt from direct government control. Most people don't know what that is and what that means and what that entails, because everybody is under what they call public policy. Public policy is where they police, control, and regulate any and everything that you do. That's why your status got to be in private sector. It's got to be in the international non-government world. So that's why when you look at the Indigenous Water Bank Cooperative, you'll notice that it's an international non-government organization. That means that no government is involved in anything that we do on a global scale. We keep government out of it. We keep politics out of it. We just focus on the people, their rights, their infrastructure, community development, and move forward with international law supporting us.
I think it's dynamic to consider the approach you've taken while people within the construct of the corporate United States are navigating a completely different type of situation right now. So you have preemptively created an off-ramp, or almost like I don't know, like an escape hatch or something from what's happening here, because what's happening here is so stupefying to people. They have no idea what's actually happening and how swiftly the system here is being intentionally caved. It seems it's intentionally being deconstructed. And before such action, it's also being completely destabilized. So, those who've known know this is not a new plan. Like those of us who've been studying these systems and systems changes in particular, we have been aware for years that this was always the plan for this particular structure called the United States, this company, this corporation. It was always going to be divided and liquidated, basically. And that's essentially what we see happening, it seems. I mean, right now, even concurrent to this conversation, the stock markets internationally are they're down significantly. And I heard something very interesting today, and this relates to synchronicity. We're talking about system change, synchronicity, and the mother culture. On the stock market, they pause when the markets go down 7%. That's the first pause they put to allow the traders on the floor to kind of get themselves together, because it's such a fury and a frenzy in that whole environment in trading right on the stock market. They say the next pause occurs at 13% down.
Right.
And then the final pause occurs at 20% down. And once the stock market hits 20% below, they just stop the market. But I think it's interesting when we look at the factors of natural timing, for example, the ratios here, 7, 13, 20.
And 20.
So what we're talking about here in the Nuwbun Olmec mathematics, we're talking about those very factors. These are the fundamental factors of the synchronic order. That's one of the things we look at here relative to the galactic spin. Now, I think that clearly applies because you're talking about precedents in systems of cooperative economics, literal cooperative economics, that's
On a
established
global
on a
scale,
global scale,
yeah,
which
with
if we
people
look from
operating.
within the United States right now, I'd be very curious to know the perspectives of other of your collaborators in these cooperatives globally and what
Mhm,
their perception of what's happening inside the US experiment is, being
mhm,
that they've also established themselves in right relationships similarly to the way you have,
mhm,
right? Whereas here in the United States, it it's interesting. It goes back to that idea of things stopping basically in 1999.
right,
And maybe you'll talk a little bit about that in a moment,
mhm,
just because I think there's some important context there. But what we
right,
see now in the United States, at least, is there is a layer of abject denial
mm,
about the systems that we live under, and it's further amplified by the artificial calendar. I think
right,
that's a very important subject. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time to be here with me, and this time for this episode 27 of this ceremony. We trust that everything is great with Ruben, and that we will pick up with him in the future, because I definitely know we're not going to be able to cover everything in this episode. However, before we go any further, I want to actually bring Brother Wanik into the conversation, and hopefully he hears me there in the background, and we'll bring him on right away. In Lakesh, Baba Wanik, Shabazz, Ken 86. Let me make sure we got your mic in the room. Go ahead and tell me if you hear me.
I hear you quite
All right.
fine.
All right,
In that case,
fam. Oh man, this is right now, this moment for me. I know you all have been rolling together for years, but I tell you what, to have both of you on this platform at this time in this particular ceremonial space that Ruben and myself and our team Michelle and Alejandra have been holding is no less than sacred. So I just want to start to acknowledge the divinity in both of you brothers, as I've had the chance to know you very well over several years, decades at this point, in fact. And I know with King Etznab, we crossed paths in 2006, 7, 8, somewhere in that window. And then, the currents of life continue on as we've been hearing his story and testimony from 2010 and all the things that he's been establishing, the precedents that he's been setting, in fact. I was really heartened to know that he had returned from that journey, coming forward with some real substance to share with people, and knowing obviously that would dovetail with Map Time Jazz and you, Baba Wanik Shabazz, the Hierophant, I would say, par excellence, as you anchor and embody the world bridger archetype. And so thank you for being that high priest of the Nuwbun culture and I love that T-shirt, by the way. Give thanks for showing up accordingly for the assignment. But just to acknowledge both of you, and really the fact that you all are laying some significant groundwork. And I really want to invite people out there listening in to do your research. What you're hearing tonight in many ways, as I've been saying, is precedent setting. And as we watch the slow train wreck that is called the United States of America currently, there are some who've fortunately been able to suspend themselves in animation and observe this train wreck without being caught up in the train wreck. And I feel like I'm in company of those right now who've long already positioned themselves as such. And so we have a lot of listeners here tuning in from South Africa, for example, from parts of Europe. So they're not in the United States. They don't have necessarily the same context as we might have being here in this Turtle Island, United States. So I just find it very interesting, this moment that we're collectively navigating. As I was saying, things are deteriorating. In many cases, the U.S. system is deteriorating rapidly, is as if by design. And that's one thing just to witness. It has a lot of collateral damage. We I don't want to paint that lightly, because I know a lot of people are really affected right now. I mean, human lives, whether they've been conditioned to ignore like we're talking about, or neglect the facts, in many cases, they have never been presented the facts. We even see
Right.
right now in Florida as the effort to rewrite and retell history. I mean, on some level, they're retelling what was already a fabrication, but then to completely omit uh, the scourge of enslavement in the United States, for example, that has occurred. Now, maybe the way it occurred isn't exactly the way it occurred isn't necessarily how it's been told to us specifically, because there are some parts of that as well we should probably get into. But I guess I'm just laying out the fact that we're at a time where clarity is key. Clarity is key, and community is everything. Having a community to turn to in a time where people who otherwise live very individuated lives, they don't really have community necessarily. We're
Right.
being forced by nature itself to return to our roots. Our roots are community. And
Mm-hmm.
through this rapid river, as the Hopi prophecy describes this time, a raging river of transformation, everybody's getting swept into that river.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to thank you, though, King Etznab, for setting precedence, and you as well, Wanik, for the way you've both been navigating this and bringing that awareness to a lot of folks. So big respect for that.
Well,
Yes.
I'll say in our cash and Allah King, of course, received in all the levels of acknowledgement that you just brought forth in your leading. Obviously, doing your job and doing the work of the bridge as well, and understanding how that's so essential to making sure that there's an end to this mess. Because there's a lot of things that's happening that creates that mess. And the mess, in my view, in terms of the science, the Nuwbun science is the mental, emotional, the spirit, and the soul. And that's part of the message that we're bringing forth is that we're making inroad, as you talked about, location wise and where we are. In fact, Velotropa 108, that's where we are in the larger galactic scheme of things, and that is our real neighborhood, right? That's where we really are pulling in the information from the Galactic Federation, and of course, as being demonstrated by what you're hearing from Brother Kisa, or as well known as King Etznab Shaquan Rai, is a typical way of recognizing the importance. As you said, as he came back into the fray, actually coming from underground and doing what is necessary under the radar because of his assignment. What his signature, the chore that he was assigned, right? That allowed for him to be able to establish other things that are now not just hyperbolic or not just conversation, not just that which feels fluffy, and warm, and cozy, but to say, okay, here's the tangible evidence of who we are, of the greatness, of the origins of our existence, and not from a standpoint of elitism that comes with this whole idea of what it is, the classism that is usually established. So, and you just hitting a few nuggets of what has been um, brought forth and established, from the likes of our brother, and what he represents in terms of the larger aspect of what my work is, what my work, unfolded by me making an inroad and making my juncture, making my journey, into the law of time or the foundation for the law of time, and coming, going, and excavating the science from there, from the work of Jose Arguelles and what he represented in terms of his own research, because that's what he was. He was a researcher. He was also an artist in that sense, and he took the information that was there already established, and he began to disseminate it as he ushered out the closing of the European cycle, or the cycle of the matrix, or the cycle of white supremacy, as it were. And I think that the more we recognize those signposts, I think it's best to say, the signposts put forth everything that we can now have a reference point to what is really tangible and actual, as opposed to it saying, well, what it would look like in sound bites, in reels, and the TikTok flow of things that only give you bits and pieces, of the information, but it's never brought forth and substantiating itself based on the foundation and what it is to be able to say, okay, that sounds good. And most people are now inured to do what is necessary relative to the 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because the attention span is so limited now. That they're so distracted by everything going on that you can't get somebody to read a book or extensively, or to go into the annals, of information that has been established. And this is what you were speaking to when we talk about, the libraries, where they're burying the lies, or where they actually are now burning the books. I mean, in a proverbial way, they're burning the books. They're removing the evidence of what is researchable and what is really could be put forth, about the reality of things that have been put into the public square, as King Etznab said earlier, talking about, this public policy. Everything is based on the policing of the mind, policing of thought, and controlling the thought and controlling the way that is being expressed or disseminated, as all thought is chemistry. So everything that happens, from the neurological composites are now being put forth in terms of how we now put all that onto the table, so to speak, and to let that now speak for itself, because the things that needs to be provided is, as you stated, we're not here to try to apologize for the collapse of the empire. The empire has always been unsustainable. And we've been talking about that, and King and I can attest. 27 years ago, we were talking about this, very moment, and we watched it happen. And at that point, when he was bringing forth information, when him and I had encountered each other based on the journeys and the life path we were on, we were also providing that, as you well know, my work as a journalist, or my work as being on a communicator on RFG, and also being one that is keeping the record as to who he is, one of my nomas, to be able to recognize the information and the wisdom that we've been talking about, not just because we have this now platform that you're now providing, Galactic Spin, or my platform, Map Time Jazz. We've been speaking about this and speaking about all these pointers from every aspect and facet of the society, whether it be from the musical entertainment, or whether it be from the political arena, whether it be from the religious or spiritual standpoint. All that has been wrapped up into what we have been creating for the manifestation of this very moment. So I feel like, it is very much, apropos that we are here and we're making it happen. And Galactic Spin for the kin, is important, because everything that's happening is based on, the level of vibration that supports what is necessary. So now there's a few things happening, and I know that sometimes, again, with the short attention span that we seem to have, I call it the sap, because people are sapped out of their mind. So you have to have a sense that when you decided, after my first appearance, which is also a very honorable appearance, to come on the Galactic Spin, and I determined, I said, okay, what we're talking about, bridges are usually centered and stable. They're usually not moving around. I'm saying, you don't move a bridge. The bridge sits still, and usually it provides access and passageway for places that are arduous to traverse, right? So we tend to have that capacity to do so. And what has happened with our brother Kizar, and he has showed that you don't have to really say a lot to do a lot. You can do a lot and be very quiet about it. Be very silent, be very, if you will, unsuspecting. And you can be able to manifest what's happening relative to the Galactic Spin, with every pun intended, because the Galactic Spin is based on the wave spells. And we just entered into a new wave spell, the wave spell of the wizard, the wave spell of the magician, the wave spell of what it is that can provide Axwell to the jaguar, and the jaguar medicine that is necessary for this particular energy to feel. So when we talk about indigenous, and as we say indigenous of us, or when we talk about what is obvious, oftentimes we get pushback. We get pushback, from the what we call the pan, which is the Pan-African narrative, right? We talk about that from that standpoint, where the Pan-African narrative is based on that which is also the fan, right? Okay, the false African narrative, that really has us really thinking that we're removing ourselves from that displaced energy of saying that we are not where we belong. We belong, or we came from, or we were captured or kidnapped from somewhere else. And everything we do here, we do as a displaced, lost in space, collective and community or family, or that which is not our birthright, And when we start looking and going deeper, you see it now everywhere you look and turn, and you can't laugh about it, because now everybody is all of a sudden recognizing that there's something specific and particular to being in America versus being somewhere else, or much less Africa. And that everything is starting here. And a lot of that narrative is only soundbite narrative. Because they are not prepared, or not even willing to take what they're saying and go deeper with it to the real accessible information that came from or has been done by the research of Kisar. And that is truly given the credit where it is due, because understanding the credibility of someone is not just to say that he's deep and he sounds profound, and then it becomes a scam, for profit purposes, you know what I'm saying? And you don't see anything else coming out of it. So I just want to thank you for having the testicular fortitude, and having that sense of integrity to want to allow us to come through and speak to that on your path, on this very powerful, very, if you will, I like to say it's the bastion of what we know relative to what needs to happen on the communication level relative to the cosmic law. Because if we don't have these platforms, and we do, and that's why we got that glitch earlier where everything shut down, and you just have to have patience to hold the frequency, right?
That's right.
Because regardless of what the matrix does and what the gremlins try to do, we have to make sure we are forthrightly ready to hold and have that what they call that the fortitude, right? Not the fortitude, but also the way to create that barrier so we can maintain the focus. And again, and that's where we are relative to the synchronicity of things, and the levels of where we know we got to go, and we got to give honor and give respect, where it's due. That's all I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the purposes here, is to amplify that fact, because, disclosing or suppressing or denying these truths, I don't think it's afforded us to be in such a great condition collectively up to now. So what are we going to do different? And it's a very important time to ask ourselves that particular question. Not only what are we going to do, but who are we to become? We sort of talked about this on the last episode, a couple of episodes, in fact, because what's happening in this frequency shift is inviting us to be cognizant of the power of being heart-centered, and by doing such, you are establishing yourself in the core. And right now, to even navigate or come to some level of acceptance, it's very difficult for people who've been conditioned by the system of white supremacy to see anything outside of that system as having merit or value. Right. And so this is why we have to also slow walk people with a bit of compassion to a certain degree, because they've been unfortunately cut off in many cases from their own ability to even decide for themselves. When we look at the conditioning that's occurred to us on a planet scale, I mean, it's stymieing. Religious conditioning, secular conditioning, academic conditioning. For example, the anthropological and archaeological conditioning that we've even accepted when we talk about a lot of these artifacts of the ancient ones, in the Inca, and when I say the Inca, the fact that they were in the lands in Peru, though they would tell you themselves they didn't build those structures. Similarly to the Maya and Teotihuacan or some of these other structures throughout the Americas and what's called Mexico in particular, the people, the Aztecs or the Maya before them, didn't claim to build Teotihuacan. In fact, even to this day, when you check the academic record, there's basically there's apparently no evidence to support who did it. Now, I find that intuitively to be questionable, considering however many other things have been denied or neglected or kept from any record, that would help inform people about the fact of the origins of the peoples of this land. And you mentioned the fact that there's the contrast with what we're taught academically about the out of Africa story, about the civilizational rise out of Africa as the key and lone cradle of civilization, and that's what we've all been told to some degree academically. We come up learning that in school, particularly in the United States. Whereas what we're now discovering or rediscovering or remembering through archaeological discovery is the fact that the story goes back way much further than the Christian telling of the story to say 6,000 years was the limit. That's somebody's genesis. It doesn't mean it's the genesis of the entirety of civilizations of the world. And as King Etznab was elucidating earlier, the presence of the Olmec Nuwbun, so-called Olmec or Nuwbun civilizations, are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years old. And there is archaeological evidence to support calendars, like a lot of the archaeological things that have been recovered from the land, so-called Turkey, that part of the world, where we know that there are similarities to what is found archaeologically there, and similarly other places around the world. As you said, the Nuwbuns already were circumnavigators, and before the continental drift, there was the presence of them throughout the world. Now that runs that as they say, smacks in the face of reality for people, because their realities have been curated, we could say. They haven't necessarily gone to the depth of doing their own genealogical research and connecting the dots, or going to these sacred sites and connecting in that way, perhaps. Regardless of what it is, we're obviously in the time where what has been concealed is very assuredly being revealed. And I think that's why
it's also
right now
important
is what's important. Go ahead,
I think
Wanda.
it's also important to know when you were searching for that word, and I think the word is uncovery more than discovery, because we're not having a Columbus moment. That's also very important too, to uncover which has already been there, and recover it, so that it could be able to be put back into perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that if you notice a lot of the public discourse in the public circle, public square, is talking about immigration or migration. We're talking about indigenous. Everything now is really the focal point is on what is happening with the immigrants, those, the rights of one staking a claim of their birthright as to what they are now tied to landmass wise, and how much of that can be authenticated, by virtue of the evidence of the archaeological, or even that which is basic, because you don't really need all that, because now we're talking about bloodlines and DNA and things that really truly substantiate one's existence, and that comes from a longer, very extensive historical context. That once you get into understanding that and get into realizing and recognizing that, that's going to be where the claims are going to be made, and the claims are going to be able to be substantiated, not just based on someone co-opting or someone, pretending, that they are part of something. We call the pretendians. King was talking earlier about the Dow's roles, and those who are faking their level of established, order, where they are now benefiting from that which is being distributed and be given welfare or giving, what they call, the reparations of that particular energy, because they recognize how profitable it is. So just because
Mhm.
someone thinks and put it in their head don't mean that they have indigenous, heritage. You know what I'm
Let me.
saying?
I want
That's,
to say something. I
yeah,
wanted to
yeah, go
say
ahead.
something
Go ahead, Keith. Mhm.
about all of that, because this is, and in the galactic spin of things, obviously a lot of this was already predicted, that it was going to be this type of chaos with the people. Okay, now, indeed, and it's obviously in the writings and in the scrolls and in the tablets. There's a preservation of a bloodline, right? Okay, it talks about a bloodline being preserved, a bloodline of life being preserved in all of these different tablets, and they are seeing with Atumbre, you know what I'm saying? It was certain people on Tamaray that he taught cuneiform to. It wasn't a lot of people that he actually taught cuneiform to, and I was privy to get into that circle of things with the elites where you could actually get the information concerning the cuneiform, the tablets, and then different stuff he was putting in the holy tablets. But it was a real secret part where it was about the preservation of a bloodline and how the lineage DNA tumble had to be preserved and how it had to be legally documented and kept sacred, and I was the person that was responsible for making sure that that happened, because I was aware of it and putting it in a legal framework, not just rhetoric, not just talk, not just on, doing reels and on YouTube and social media, but actually making it legal. Now, I've put in all of the claims legally. I just haven't shown it to the public. I've put all of the claims on everything legally, from the United States, Canada, Mexico, um, Jamaica, the Caribbean, the United Kingdom, Royal Courts of Justice. See, I got records of all of this stuff that I've taken from antiquity and made it current. The United Nations, the whole nine. There's places where you file documentation, you get annexation, you make things legal. I've successfully done that on a global scale. How do you make something legal? How do you get it authenticated? How do you get it recognized? I went through that process also. Not just something to say, but it's documented evidence. And I've had the backs of a lot of people who I don't even agree with, because a lot of the documents that I did, it included a lot of other people, even though I don't agree with what they say, I don't agree with their culture, but I still put them in there just so they can have a chance. And they don't know that I've done this because I haven't revealed it to the public. And it's been done for many years, because I knew it was going to be a time period where the people were going to need to have some type of legal documentation, legal backing, and they needed a framework and an infrastructure that they could operate from, rather than just talk. Like, we know that a lot of people have birthright, lineage, but is it legally recognized? Is it in the place where it actually matters? Does it have the recognition that it's supposed to have? That's what we're looking at. And we got to make sure that everybody have the legal recognition in the international world of their claims. And that's a part that people are not really familiar with. That's why I say these things are very important. Having that established precedence. This is not just me saying, oh, I'm King Etznab Shaquan Rai. No, all my credentials, all my awards, accomplishments, in every place that matters, it's recognized. This is what's important for other people as well, being established, because a lot of our people, we have a lot of legitimate claims, but is it legally recognized where it needs to be recognized? We got to make sure that we have that. It's like the Pope, for example. Okay, well, what gives him unquestioned authority to do whatever he wants to do and it be unquestioned? It's something that he established that give him that authority. He ain't just doing it. He had to establish himself some kind of way to have that legitimate authority. And that's what I'm talking about in a legal sense and the framework. You know, if we was to look at Etznab, we would look at Nuwbun Ali, look at Malcolm X, Dr. King, we'd be like, well, they was very powerful orators. They had very powerful voice. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad and all these people we seen, they had a very powerful voice. Okay, but what about legal status, credentials for the safeguard and the protection? That's what I knew that was missing, because I would watch it all. I would watch everybody like, look, everything they saying is legit, it's official, but where is it recognized? You know, and I just felt like we needed to make sure we had a system and infrastructure. I wasn't hearing them talk about the things that I saw that was important in terms of us having indigenous status, these documents being recognized, these documents being annexed, these things being pushed into law that actually make a difference. You know, that's the part that I knew that was very important for us, to make sure that we can put things into law and it actually be recognized. You getting things passed into law. You're not just saying this just because it sounds good. You know, you want to make sure that the people in positions of power, or quote unquote powers that be, in illusion, recognize who you are, recognize what's real. And I always would tell people that it's going to be a problem if you don't have international law involving, you're not making these international incidents. They're not looking at this on the level that they need to look at it on, because it's not considered an international incident. It's just a local and domestic issue that they just keep their hands off, because it don't involve anything international. It's not an international war crime. You see what I'm saying? Like something that actually, that they can look into, investigate, where some people can bring something down, you know. And that's the problem that we're having, because everybody is just too local and domestic and into public policy. But we want to also give acknowledgement. We talk about truth. Well, we're talking about the truth brewery right now versus the library. You know, they got the library, we got the truth brewery. This is where the real truth, undiluted truth resides. You know, they into capitalism, we're into cooperative economics. They're two different worlds. They're into government, we're into non-government. See, there's a contrast with what we're doing. So it's important for us to recognize, you know, we're indigenous people. They're not indigenous peoples. So the people who are quote unquote $5 Indians, they know the value of what it is to be indigenous. And they also know the value of what it is to have soul. But when you look at a lot of our people, we see that so many of our people have sold their soul because they don't know the value of it. And that's why they're in this time stop. The reason why so many of our people is in this time stop matrix, because they stop evolving and they sold their soul. That's why society looks the way that it does. You know, so we got to be people who are not selling our souls and not bowing to white supremacy, whether it's in the music industry, film, or whatever. You know, obviously it's an agenda that's there that we have to address. You know, white supremacy has been a real serious problem for a long time, but we see that it's crumbling from within. Now you're seeing people who don't look like us get out on the streets in millions and protest against this, right? We never seen it like this, because we're in a time period now where they're even tired. They're tired of it. So if you're trying to create segregation, like you did before, because once again, it's all just duplications of the past. Every since 1999, that's all we've seen, duplications of the past, just duplications of going back and going back and going back. And you're like, well, Donald Trump is about to take us back. Everybody taking us back. Nobody is taking us forward anywhere except for what we're doing on this side of the ledger. See, the people are looking and we saying, well, capitalism has taken us back. White supremacy has taken us back. All of the movies, look at all the movies that come out. If we're looking at all the movies, let's just look at it. When we grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, all right, look at all the movies. We saw King Kong and Godzilla when we was kids. We saw the Karate Kid when we was kids. We saw Snow White when we was kids. We saw Cinderella when we was kids. Everything that they doing, the earth stood still. Everything they coming with is something from the past. It's nothing new that they're presenting, because it's obvious that there's a time stop. There's a time stop that the world haven't fully recognized as of yet. And we're saying that, look, it's time to move forward with cooperative economics. It's time to move forward with these calendrics, this calendar, the synchronometer, the wave spill, the cycle, the new calendar. Like, this is the thing. Everything new is what we're talking about. Community development, like, this is the new thing on a global scale. Okay, when was we ever talking about global communities and cooperative economics in this way? When was we talking about indigenous water banks? When was we having this conversation? Who was having this conversation before we're having this conversation? I don't remember none of the leaders having these conversations. And we done seen a lot of leaders come, but we never seen them have these conversations. The conversations that actually matter. Who was telling us, like, okay, well, let's get everything in order, global community, let's get on the international level, get established, status and credentials, and do what they have gotten from us. Because the people are just putting out things that they gotten from our ancestors. So it's important for us to know now that we got to move forward, be at the forefront of the new wave, the new shift, the new movement, because it's about cooperative economics. That means that it is a lot of wealthy people on this planet that want to come together, that want to unify in an economic system that works. I know that for sure, because they contact me every week from all over the world. So I know it's a whole lot of wealthy people, wealthy families all over this planet that want to do something, because they tired of how things are. They tired of the system, the corrupt system as it is. That's why you're hearing conversations about BRICS cards and BRICS currency, and the cryptocurrency was another thing that was implemented, because the world has to go into autonomous and independent cooperative economics and a system that makes sense. Something has to rival this bully of white supremacy. Something got to happen, because they are only less than 3% on a global scale, and then everybody else got melanin, and then everybody with melanin bowing to somebody that don't have melanin. That has to change. It has to be some kind of epiphany, some kind of recognition that, look, they are a minority and they are on their last leg. And then when you got people that look like them going against them, it's time for something else to happen. Because when they start marching and protesting against them, it's a major shift that is to take place. Now, they know that we supposed to have certain things, but they not going to just give it to us just because they know they owe us. We're going to have to be responsible. That's why they won't just give certain things. Why? Why won't they give us things? Because we out there trying drinking and smoking and partying. We just wild and we dancing. You see what I'm saying? We're not showing that we're organized. We're not showing that we have any maturity. We're not showing that we're ready to take our rightful place. And since they see that the people haven't evolved, they saying, well, we'll just replace them with robots, artificial intelligence, because they not taking this as serious as they should. You see, and that's why I say it's an elite thing that we have going on here, but it's time for the ones who are on that elite level that recognize the new wave, the shift, the paradigm, to be unified and then uplift the other people who are ready for a change, because it's going to be about economic empowerment. That's something I have worked on for a long time. You know, I spent most of my life in the world of banking because I knew that that was a crucial component for us. I don't talk about it much publicly, but that's been my background, dealing with assets and resources and things all over the planet for a very long time, because it was wealth that was left on this planet for us to free the nations, to save the people, to feed the people. I've been knowing that for a long time and have come across so much of it in my travels. That's why I'm saying public is public, but private is something different. You know, so that's where we got to be if we want to really be empowered. Obviously, we're going to have to tap into what the abundance that's available. And many other people have that, but the only issue is you're not evolving, bigotry, you got racism, you're not being unified, and you're not organizing to come together. Now you're being forced to come together some kind of way, because we've been talking about it for many years and the people still on individualism. And we saying community development, cooperative economics, we got to be unified on a global scale. That's the movement, regardless of race, regardless of color, regardless of creed, regardless of religion.
And I'd like to just jump in real quick and just say that's what you're demonstrating. And for people to really get a sense, because I mean, I get the sense you're speaking about the people and groups of people. And at the same time, I want folks who are tapping in here, again, from a broad international audience, not just right here in the United States, particularly, to get a sense of this wave, as you're speaking of the cooperative wave. Again, back to reflect, this is the International Year of Cooperatives, according to the United Nations. You've been part of getting that established. And on the screen, people can see from your website, iwb.coop, a demonstration of how you are resourcing this movement, which fundamentally is based in water, right? So
Yes,
talk a little bit about that in terms of that element being the stream, if you will, a currency or flow of energy through which this is also being anchored or established. You talked about annexing certain parts of, or I think even in some case, maybe you could talk about the aquifers or things like that, just to give people a sense that you're not just speaking hypothetically, you're talking about fundamental resource management, as well as how to give people access if, as you said before, they're on the correct side of the ledger. This isn't for public consumption necessarily. This is for people who are really shifting, I feel, in how they're approaching their choices moving forward, right?
Yes, sir.
So people wanting to get involved, they have to understand that this is established in the private. That's very distinctive from what people are generally used to. So I think it's important to put that out there as well.
Right.
So
Yeah, we'll go into that. Like, the reason why the Indigenous Water Bank Cooperative was established, okay, it was to bring indigenous peoples together, regardless of what everybody else is on, what they culture is. It doesn't really matter. The bottom line is we needed an economic system, right? Okay, the indigenous part is it's an old part, and it's water is the base. Okay, now we have our own aquifer, obviously, and I looked for water for a long time because I knew that we needed to have a supply of water, like the source of life, and there are aquifers all over the planet, right? And we need to make sure that we can secure those and have pure, clean, drinkable water, and those aquifers that actually flow forever. That's what I was always into, because I said, well, we need to use this as a base, because the original economic system was a water bank. That was in my research. A water bank was the original bank and banking system. So what I did was just put it together in a cohesive framework and utilize water as a base, from the aquifer, and it being like a currency for us, because we can bottle up the currency. All right, we got water that flows forever, but I had to get all of the stuff sanctioned first. I had to get all of the stuff acknowledged. I had to get all of the stuff, and I had all of these documents. I had to get valuations and all of these different things legally first. Then once I get it recognized where I know what I need it recognized, then we can move forward with it as a premier thing on a global scale. That's how it was established. And 2013, the rights of that, the water rights and everything, was sanctioned and annexed by the United States of America. The Department of State of the United States annexed the water rights of the aquifer, the water, everything, all the agreements, all the deals. And then we had all of the hydrogeologists and the evaluators and all of that. So I had these documents, a whole bunch of documents, took them to DC to have the government to sanction or annex and say, this is legitimate, this is official, and make this an international and global thing. So we got that in 2013, and Secretary of State John Kerry was the Secretary of State at the time that this was done. Now, after this was done, this was the first time I had got, we got our first award. We got our first award for water in that year. Okay, following this annex that you're showing on the screen, we got our first award for water, and we have won the award for water every year since then, because according to the reports, valuation, it was done by the leading water authority in the world, who writes the code of federal regulations for the United States and all of this. This is private sector information that was never talked about publicly. Okay, so there are certain people who do valuations privately and all these things. This is something that I had to make sure was established before we went public with anything, because if I would have told anybody what we was doing, they would have blocked it from the gate. I didn't tell nobody until after everything was done over the years. And it took years for me to establish everything that was necessary. So now we have that, and there's some other things that I've done, on a global scale, that I've gotten annexed, that are legal, in addition to this particular thing. Okay, now we saying, now we have this and we've won the award, and that's 11 years, and I'm pretty sure we'll win the award again this year for water. But 11 years, and then it's a financial or economic component to the banking part. But we won the award, the financial or the economic award, 9 of the 11 years. So that's 9/11, right? So you'll see those awards on the site as well, So from that time period up into where we are right now, I'm pretty sure we're going to win the award again. But so far, we've won the financial award 9 years, and then we won the water award 11 years consecutively. But the banking part is a whole nother dynamic, on the private side, with dealing with land, assets, resources, water, different things. That's all a part of the big idea. Okay, that's basically what we have established. Now we set it up as a system where people can join and be members and be shareholders, in the water rights in the aquifer. You can have a share, because the most important thing for you is to have some ownership. Like the key is ownership in things that are tangible. This is where empowerment comes. You got to have real, genuine ownership. And the only way that you can really get ownership is by being in a cohesive framework that's autonomous, that's independent, but at the same time, it is self-financing. It's in-house financing for everybody, and people can unify in that infrastructure and that system and be unaffected by public policy. But you must have status on the right side of the ledger where your rights and everything can be protected. International law has got to be where you're protected with all these different things. So it's not a local and a domestic issue. See, as long as you codependent upon politics and the government, you're going to have to deal with the corruption of it. You're going to have to just deal with the issues that go along with that. That's why our real movement and our fight is in our own self-governing in a non-government scenario with our own assets, resources, currency, and different things that we want to do ourselves, so we can be self-financed or in-house financed with what we want to do, collaborative and cohesive. That's what the purpose of all the wealth and all the different things that's established privately is about. So when people look at the co-op, they don't know what it is. They just looking at, okay, this is something new. This is IWB.coop. First thing that people ask me, what is a water bank? I have to take the time to explain what a water bank is because they never seen one before. We are the first of our kind, first established type infrastructure. Okay, not for profit, non-government, international, banking entity, all of these different things that give you power in your structure. Not for profit, that simply just means that it's not for third parties who are not a part of this. It's not for them to make a profit. Most people don't know that. They don't know that the only people that I will be responsible for is the people who are members and shareholders. That's who I disperse and share things with. I don't have no obligation to share nothing with a third party. Why? Because I'm not government. I'm non-government. I don't have no government obligations. But see, people have to understand that type of structure first before they can make sense of what it is. So it's going to take a little educational curve because everybody know about LLCs, being incorporated, public policy, 501c3s and 508Ds, and they know about that side of things, but they don't know about private sector, autonomy and independence, the only system that's globally recognized as being quote unquote sovereign. That's in the book. There's a co-op book that I got. In fact, I got a portion of it here. I can flash it on the screen, and we're gonna talk about all those other things. But in this book right here, I'm gonna show this. So this right here is the co-op book. Okay, and this is the number of co-ops around the world. And this book is to show everybody that there are co-ops and a system that's established that's internationally recognized. Okay, now this came out also in 2012. This book right here is a very important book, and I want to show one part of this. If we can see it on the screen here, we're going to show you this part of this so the viewers can understand what I mean by autonomous and independent systems that actually work. Okay, I'm gonna show this. Now I'm showing this in the bottom corner. Let's see here. I don't know if you can see it, but it tells you that it's the only legally sovereign entity that's recognized globally. But I know most of them probably can't see it, but it's in the co-op book. Okay, so this is a system that's globally recognized as being independent, sovereign, autonomous, independent, self-governed infrastructure that is globally recognized. And we have to have that as a people. We have to have a system that makes sense where we can be self-governed and it be acknowledged and it be recognized. So since that is something that is in law on a global scale that the United Nations recognize, that all of the International Co-op Alliance recognizes, that COPAC recognizes, National Cooperative Business Association, and the governments recognize this system that is in place. But we had to have all of these things first. We couldn't just show up and just say, okay, we indigenous, and the co-ops, and we can't just say it. We got to have legal precedents. So now we see that the United Nations is behind the indigenous permanent forum. So we have a permanent forum at the United Nations. So every year we supposed to be at the United Nations addressing any issues that we have with governments and all over the world. That's what the forums are about. Every year we have a permanent forum at the United Nations to address indigenous issues concerning land and everything. And governments are there, governments are present, because people got to be held accountable now. So we got a system of economics that work for us. We got indigenous status. We got international status. Now we got the financial piece or component that makes sense for us, and we're utilizing water, on a global scale. And we can provide that to people all over the planet. And there are aquifers everywhere. So you got a lot of indigenous peoples with land, have aquifers. We have a system and an infrastructure where that could be bottled up and provided to the community. It's a system and an infrastructure that is so simple and so practical because everybody needs water.
Right.
No matter who you are, you need water. And having pure and uncontaminated water is very scarce. So if we have this, it puts us in a very powerful position, because if we got the best water that we can provide for human health and also wealth, so be it. That's how we move. So that's the infrastructure in a practical sense that we need in a time of crisis. That's why, we know people can be marching and protesting, right? But one thing we know, if they out there running, marching, protest, they still gonna need water. Dogs gonna need water. They pets gonna need water. They horses gonna need water. Their football team gonna need water. Their kids need water. Everybody and everything. So why is it that we can't be resourceful and provide clean, drinkable water? If they making billions off of providing toilet water, poisoning water, and making people sick, then why can't we contrast that? It's that simple. And we can bank on it. We can bank on that part of it, because we ain't selling drugs. We provide water to people.
Not only any kind of water, the best water on the planet.
Exactly.
Like just not any kind of water. You're talking
Exactly.
about pure award-winning water.
Exactly. That's us, so that's what we supposed to be doing in our time, because we see that they done poison the water. We see that the water is no good. And this scroll, speaking of that, this scroll here I wrote, this is Science of Water here. This is Science of Water scroll, this particular scroll. In this scroll, I predicted the water crisis years ago. I predicted that it was going to be a major water crisis in this particular scroll. And nobody said anything. Okay, they'll remember the Indigenous Water Bank been established for 15 years. What was I talking about? I was talking about the water crisis that was going to take place and how we were going to need water. Like I said, everything has already been written. The work been done. So we 15 years later, and people are just learning about what the big idea was. What was the Nuwbuns talking about in terms of prophecy? How was it going to be a new world? What was that going to look like? Who was going to bring it forth? Because they predicted it. They predicted that a old world was going to die. They predicted. When you say doomsday prophecy, you say, okay, an old paradigm, they have it. They say the old time cells of perception will be replaced with the new time cells of consciousness. So what side of the ledger? Are you in the old time cells of perception? Or are you in the new time cells of consciousness? In the new world, doing new things and making people happy, families. There is no lack on this planet,
That's
right?
right.
Okay, so why is it so many people lacking? Obvious, there's an agenda, right? So since we know that the agenda is based upon white supremacy, and we seeing that die off, we just let the sun do what it's gonna do. We let the suns come. Remember, we dealing with sun cycles. We dealing with the suns. They put the suns on there. Those are the sun gods and the deities. Let the sun do what it's gonna do to people who can't stand the sun,
Right.
right? Let it do what it's gonna do. We over here working. That's what we doing. We over here building. That's why I told you we're gonna have at least another 8 years of this chaos and this foolery. But what are we gonna do? Get caught up in the chaos and the foolery, or are we gonna be over here building what we need to build? Because the foundation is there. The ancestors done already did the work. I just took it and put it in the framework. And nobody can deny me. Nowhere on the planet. Everywhere that matters, I'm recognized everywhere that matters. The infrastructure is recognized everywhere that matters. So now it ain't no argument about, is this legit? Well, I'm showing you agreements. I'm showing you awards. Well, who's who in America recognizes it? The Royal Courts of Justice in the UK, the Department of State of the United States of America, the United Nations, International Co-op Alliance. The list goes on and on.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So now we just like, okay, well, it's our time to cooperate, unify, synchronize, and everything we've been talking about. So we talking about all the time and the Galactic Center. Okay, so we just gotta get the universe sun and nature what it's gonna do. And we talk about the center. I ain't never seen nobody go up against the universe and win. You see what I'm saying? So if the universe doing this thing, we need to do our thing because it decided to align itself in our favor for the people who are honoring the ancestors all around the world. That's why you got to live in truth.
Right.
That's why we made it an acronym, LIT. When we said, yo, we lit, we made it an acronym, live in truth. That's what we do. We live in truth. We don't worry about all the other stuff that they got going on. We see it, but what does that mean to us? Nothing. When we moving on this side of the ledger, if you're not moving in that way, you got a lot to be concerned with. So that's why it's important for the people on a global scale to be unified. Not saying that everybody got to be a part of the Indigenous Water Bank. I'm not saying that. Other people can have co-ops and infrastructure, but as long as you're being unified, because some
Right.
people have a problem, like, whoa, have a problem with the individual. Well, it's King Shaquan Rai. I don't like him. So I'm like, well, okay. I can't do nothing about that. But King Shaquan Rai got his stuff together. You know what I'm saying? He gonna be okay. So you can be where you want to be. I'm not imposing it upon you. I'm just saying This is an acknowledgement. Be aware of this. You can't say that you ain't know, because we are in year 15, and I just started just putting stuff on the site, just throwing it on there. Like, here we go. See, because now you're looking at the work that you got to do on your own, because the work has already been done. So you can like, oh, well, he just showing up and he popping up out of nowhere. Like I told you, 15 years strong. I've been doing this way before. I've been on this journey way back in my 20s, even in the 90s. I've been on the same path. I just made it live and put it in a way that the world can see it and say, okay, well, this is our thing. Because a lot of stuff I haven't even shown. But the thing is, I know I've shown enough to let people know that something else as an alternative is established. And that's all they need to know. You know what I'm saying?
You just got the Olmec punch, y'all. Straight up.
That's right.
But for real. So King Etznab, I just want to give thanks.
Hold
What's
on.
that?
And
here we go.
This is the water.
Here we go. Show everybody the logo, though. I love the logo. I want to see the ancestors right there.
Yeah, the brand,
IWB, Indigenous Water Bank. Y'all seeing it right here. The Galactic Spin podcast. Big up. Yeah, move it up. There we go. We're right there in the scene. It looks like you on your label.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And see, the thing is, we say this, and I said, this is our label. This is our brand. This is our thing. You see the crystal in there?
Come on.
The amethyst crystal in there.
Come on.
So the crystal core, the crystal mirror,
yeah,
and everything with us on there. So we can be proud. We can be proud of our ancestors. I have them on everything.
Yeah.
As you see, like even where I go, like if I turn around, you'll see what's on my back.
Oh man, they got your back. Yes, there we go. Come on, hold that pole. Let me get the right frame here for people to see this. There we go. That's right.
Yeah.
Show them the helmet. Show them the helmet. That's real.
And they own everything. So my shoes, I can go and get my shoes right now. They own my shoes, my hats, my clothes, everything. I keep the ancestors with me at all times because I feel like that's our protection. That's our security. They was the ones that established this, and I keep them with me. Whether humans like me or care or not, I'm going to keep them with me.
Come on.
I'm going to be in tune with the galaxy, natural time, the universe, and I'm going to have the ancestors with me. So when I'm walking out here, I'm Teflon.
Oh, man.
And they own the superpower H2O that I drink. And they was the one talking about aquifers and all of that and pyramids. Why not put their face on there?
That's right.
Give credit where it's due. Give the credit where it's due. So I want to acknowledge something else. This year also happens to be Gregorian year 2025 also happens to be the year of international indigenous languages. Mm-hmm. So, and I found something interesting on your blog I wanted to share, and people can find this on iwb.coop. The secrets are in the language, and this is how you gauge the land. It appears to be a consistent effort to deprive us of our true birthright, heritage, and star lineage. This, again, is why knowing your GPS, trademarked, by the way, and copyrighted, coordinates is important. I'll say that again. This, again, is why knowing your... Yeah, of course. I'm going to get that. I got you. This, again, is why knowing your GPS, credit to Baba Wanique Shabazz right there, your GPS coordinates is important to properly navigate in your purpose, as you are obviously demonstrating. It goes on to say, according to my GPS, this being yourself, King Etznab, Shaquan El Ray, I am Etznab, the white crystal mirror, crystals in your drink, with the crystal tone of cooperation, international cooperations. You're checking all the boxes here. So I was born to be cooperative and build co-ops. Furthermore, I carry what is known as the sword of truth. In essence, I cut through your illusion and falsehood. Therefore, the truth has made me free from control, as I am free, autonomous, and independent. I just wanted to share that just to contextualize what you're sharing with us and the essence of that. And I also wanted to acknowledge Baba Wanik, Ken 86, the Galactic World Bridger, for his GPS technology, we can say, to make and clear sense and sense make of the mess that we're each born into, right? And we're born into that because we have an obligation to navigate that, to reconcile with our source of life being our parents. And as you're referring to the ancestors, I also connect them with that relational field, right? Our ancestors, our forebears, that we ascend from. So in light of that, I just wanted to put that there for context as we're, relaying a lot of information for people.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, you are moving through free. It doesn't matter how people perceive this. And I really want people to really take that to heart, because if anything is being extended right now, in essence, it's grace. And I say that to say, when we hit 1999, as you so aptly observed, and we talked about last night on Map Time Jazz, shout out to WRFG 89.3 FM in Atlanta, Georgia, and our brother Wanik Shabazz on the conversation last night, we heard you speak about the Matrix film, as you even indicated here in this conversation, and how that, in effect, established a certain time loop where there's been nothing new really since that point in time. So even crossing the millennium, nothing new made it across that threshold technically. In fact, a lot of what was already established, even as it relates to the law of time, was established before that time. So it was already established.
Exactly.
So fortunately, it was established. So at least that bled through that time loop in such a significant way. Whereas people even tuning in right now in live or anywhere tapping into this conversation, who is aware of the law of time, they can testify to that themselves. Yet at the same time, society itself, it seems it hit a wall or that loop. And even beyond its own control, it doesn't even realize it's in a time loop.
Right.
That's part of the challenge, is it's not even something that's, people are not cognizant of how they are caught up in that warp or that loop. But nevertheless, while that's happening, you've been focused underground, as Wanik said earlier, in the underworld, we might say, really recovering these frameworks, establishing these new parameters for new systems. So I just wanted to say that and paint that picture for people to really give a context of what we're even talking about here, for the sake of, okay, here is a set of solutions demonstrated by somebody walking in that autonomy. Autonomy that's available to everybody, actually. Everybody, it's available to anybody. You embody on this planet, you embody to be autonomous, frankly. Unless you voluntarily give up that right of self-governance through deception or coercion or force.
And it's in the thing is, you're saying that, but it's in all the international articles of law.
Yes.
It's there, it's written. All you got to do is read the articles.
Yep.
All the stuff is in there, like the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. You can pull that up right now. It'll give you can go directly to Article 4 on there. If you pull a Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People, it'll give you a layout of that. You go to the Human Rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it'll give you the same thing. They got something called ILO 169 that gives you the same things. These are things that have been ratified under international law, been sanctioned and annexed and acknowledged, that has been into law, for years. And people have these natural rights. But the cooperative part is another part, because if you go to Article 4, just like you were showing International Co-op Alliance, okay, pull up the seven principles of cooperatives, 7 principles of cooperatives. Notice what Article 4 tell you. It's going to tell you autonomy and independence as a right for the entity, the organization, and all the people. That is a internationally recognized law and principle.
I'm trying to pull it up, frankly. I wish I would have had it ahead of time. In any case, we can encourage people to go look it up for themselves. Let's do that.
7 principles, 7 cooperative principles. You can, Google however it is, just 7 cooperative principles,
Yeah.
and it'll give you a layout of all 7. And then you just go to number 4. It's a requirement in the co-op structure to be autonomous and independent and not give up your autonomy.
Right.
Makes
It's a requirement.
Makes sense. The prerequisite. Don't give
And I
it
think
up.
that's an important factor too, because when we talk about synchronicities and walking in the path of your life, or your life path as it were, which is obviously directionally guardians, it's well known, that 13 years of my navigation, I was involved with a local co-op, and dealing with the principles of co-op because they come in all different forms, but it was locally, focused. But it's also given the larger aspect of what King had just pointed out. Those 7 cooperative principles are universal, and they're very much, international, and they are made and set up for the interaction of those who now want to walk in their light or walk in their path, as the GPS is, as the galactic purpose signature helps to navigate the terrain of which you're born into, that you incarnated into. So you can be able to really know that you're walking on a terrain that you are now establishing as your ground for the foundational process of everything happening. And the cooperative model surpasses that. It actually was set up to, in fact, allow for those who need to remove themselves from the collapse of capitalism to know that there is an alternative that goes back to what we call the Susu system, right? Okay, and also back to not only the Susu. This is where the Black Wall Streets and the Rosewoods and all those different areas that we talk about that was established as a part of an economic internal system for the community. This is not a new phenomenon. But what happened is that the desecration or the disintegration, which is called the integration that happened in terms of that which is now allowing for social interaction with others who had no sense of what it was to be cooperative. They were very much into robbing, stealing, co-opting, and land grabbing.
Yeah.
And removing those who actually have the indigenous rights to the land mass. For what? For the barter of medium of exchange for goods and services. This is where the idea around understanding fair trade comes from. So all this is really wrapped up into now. And me and King we were just talking about this. I think it was the plasma. We were talking about that because we're talking about the lack of involvement and engagement of melanin dominant people in these basic tenets. Basic tenets, man. And they're still holding on to try to think that we can save this dying, already dead, flatlined system of things. It's dead.
Yep.
The only life being breathed into it is the life support that people are given to while it's laying on its back on the striker.
Oof.
So therefore, the question becomes, the alternative question is, what is going to be your course of action? We dare say, and you said the Olmec punch, we dare say, if you prepared, you ain't got to be scared. Never scared, because you're always prepared. And this is what been provided by the virtue of the work that's been put in by the crystal mirror. What has happened is already something that you don't have to be concerned about. Because it seems like, we get this boogeyman situation going on where they're constantly reinforcing, this idea around the Bilderbergs and the Rothschilds. And, I remember I was on the King, we talked about before, that over the years, all these years, because remember, we had the gathering of the masters. In fact, that was one of the encounters that me and King had early on, where it was great to have this constant understanding of the systems that exist that are very much diabolical, very much sinister, and only empowerment that came out of that is that people were more scared than it was when they went in. Because now you had this bedtime story that told you about the ghosts and goblins of the system, and nothing that was an alternative to what was the course of action, what was the antidote for what we have now learned, other than the fact that we don't want to sleep in the room by ourselves and we want to sleep in your mommy and daddy's room because we're scared out of our wits about how they get away with so much and how much they're doing and how much stuff they're going and the Freemasonry, and all those things that with the secret societies, right? we laugh about it because we recognize that it was a reinforcement of the invincibility of the diabolical system. Because only gave that it seemed that they were invincible. How do we go up against all that when we learn? When I just showed when King was talking about the who's who, I don't know if you can see it because there's a glare there. There it is. Because I don't know if you can see it there, right? Now he just mentioned that. He mentioned it briefly. But this is, this goes back. I don't know when I got this, purchased, but obviously he's now in this book, not because he's part of the diabolical system. It's because they have to recognize that which is really truly effective, and that they cannot do anything with. I don't care whether or not his physical presence is no longer here. What he has accomplished and established is already in perpetuity. It's already provided for the maintenance of what it is, and he did it for a cooperative purpose. We just talked about that early on my program on that time. We talked about that it don't matter because what has been done has been already been established, so nothing can change the crystal core of the foundation of that which is now vibrating and resonating. Because why? Because wherever there's going to be something happen there's something over here that's going to just oppose it. Because the universe is always balancing itself.
Balance, equilibrium. That's right. That's right. Well, it's good to know that we're in that time of the rebalancing. And this is exactly what I'm seeing and hearing from this transmission tonight. Shout out to the folks in the live chat. We've had quite a few people here with us on the first part and the take 2 of this episode tonight, since we had to reconfigure technologically. So I want to definitely give a shout out. Ken 86 is speaking fire. Yeah, no doubt. And people bigging up Ken 38 also in the chat. Folks are saying, what is the antidote? Cooperation is the antidote. So yeah, if you take something away tonight from this conversation, certainly take with you and forward in your journey the resonance with cooperatives. I think that is obviously a method, a framework for us to really lean into collectively. And certainly you can follow up with King Etznab via the iwb.coop website. I want to encourage people to reach out to you if they want to learn more. As you said, you're being contacted by people internationally all the time because you have obviously clearly established yourself in terms of the precedents and the spirit of collaboration, cooperation. So that's clear.
Can I add one thing though to that, because it's important to note is that when we speak about international, and of course, what King has demonstrated, is that we talk about understanding the system of cooperatives, because that's the only system that's valuable and sustainable. This idea, and this is kind of the I call it demented, because it's really truly a desecration of the reality. Like you talk about how to use capitalism in a positive way, or conscious capitalism.
It's an oxymoron.
It's an oxymoron. I mean, on his face, it's an oxymoron. Capitalism is designed to set up classes for dominance and predominance, and that which the haves and the have-nots. Keep the class system in place. That class system is no longer valuable or valuable to support of the sustainability of life on this planet as we know it. It never was and never will be. So I'm saying to you that this is not, we have to get back in alignment, because we're really moving and searching to try to make things structured. This is the life, I'm saying, that's being breathed into the dead corpse of capitalism. People are trying to breathe life into it because they still think that it's about how much you can have and who has the most in the end wins, that kind of stuff. This idea of capturing most of the wealth and then utilizing it for your own personal use. And we talked about that and demonstrated that earlier. We were speaking about what cooperation means and what coming into a cooperative model is, and why the founding upon the individual, the capsule, what is brought in, the messenger, if you will, is being, we don't want, who he think he is, and we start getting caught up in our own level of insecurity.
Right.
Because now we want to say, well, why he thinking? Because I don't like the way he do this, that, and the other. The excuses we make for the inability to make that shift. And this goes back to the individual GPSs, which is the Galactic Spin is truly about. It's about being able to understand how to navigate your own vessel.
Yeah.
And how to be able to utilize that vessel for the optimal energy field of protection, and to not have to be concerned about being set upon or having to be a martyr, having to give over your physical body to prove a point. Martin did that for us. Malcolm did that for us. They all show you that it don't work. It's not viable. It's not sustainable. And I'm saying to you, not to negate their work, not to dismiss the vibration. Malcolm was a galactic warrior. King was a overtone human. They're all incarnated to do what they were doing the best they can based on what they had to offer, but they were showing you what not to do. And even when King was talking about earlier about international law, Malcolm was set upon that. He was on that. His first thing was to get out of dealing with their courts locally, their public policy. You got to go to the international court. That's when they said we had to take him out. Not because he was cross-contaminating it with African, but he was talking about the global collective understanding that you can't go to this man's court and try to fight him in his own grounds. He'll wipe you out. And you have to take it out of that arena. And he said it very prolifically, very very articulately, if that's a word.
That's a word.
But in very much great articulation. He said it. He said that we have to no longer go into this court, take it to the international arena. Now people say, well, they corrupt everything. So we always find a way to make excuses.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't understand the establishment of universal law. And Mikuak, you know about this. Universal law supersedes and trumps, with no pun intended, everything. So regardless of what they get away with on local, domestic, or that which is based on their own composite to maintain their survival, international law is always universal law. The universal laws and universal principles always going to override that.
It allows you to establish what you want, and what I'm proof of that. Do you think they want that bottle to exist? Do you think they want that helmet on there?
Let me see that bottle again.
Be what it is.
Let's bring that bottle back.
Do you think that they want
for the people in the back? There we go.
Do you think
right,
they want?
I don't think they want that Nuwbun Olmec head on there necessarily. They're not really. They're not. But there's nothing they can do about it, and that's the point.
That's the point.
Because you have established it.
Tell me that we don't have a right to have this. The Indigenous water bank and all of these different things that we've established.
Wow.
This is our stuff.
You have a galactic right. Let's just say
a cosmic right. Cosmic right. But remember, King. Mm-hmm. When he said the helmet, and he didn't do it without spin on the helmet, it's the hell you never met. Exactly. That's why they don't want none of that. They don't want this hell they never met. Because this is why you never hear anybody speak about this helmet. They never talk about the Olmec. They try to make it, and also the false African narrative is that they came from Africa and they established all this. And I'm not saying that to be mocking. I'm not mocking. Because I'm mocking scholars and all those who have done the work. I'm saying to you, they know for certain if you keep this suppressed, keep it underground, and everywhere they go on the planet, they're excavating, they're digging up this helmet. Yeah. On the mounds of this planet is one system, one whole system. It's not, what they see in terms of boundaries and different, divisions in terms of terrain. It's one whole system. And in this part of the system that we live on is one of the richest, most established, developed part of the planet, which is right here, what we call so-called the Americas. And how did they pull that off where they swindle us to believe that we had nothing to do, and it was just a few people with TPs doing some things here, and it wasn't building nothing. So I don't want, I can get on a fire in terms of when it comes to death and destruction, because the time to remove all the imagery that supports the illusion of our existence. And we're reclaiming that not by trying to say that we're going to move into a way of trying to advocate for something that's not ours, but
Right.
it's everything you see. I know not everybody's on TikTok, everybody's on the social media, which is the social studies that's happening to us. Because really what it's about is the social studies. Everybody's talking about now, oh, we from America, oh, this is where we first started. And you got people who actually are now becoming self-professed social media scholars now. You know, we're doing
Experts, man. They
experts,
experts.
right? Experts, right?
Instant experts. Just add water.
And then, but see, the point, the proof positive, and this is why, and Mikuak, this is why we have the evidence, because me and King have been talking about this for 25 years. I got the evidence because I have the archive. So you want to bring it forth here anytime? Go ahead and subpoena me. Put me on a stand, and I'll bring the evidence. And I'll show you where we've been speaking about this, building on this, and everybody's been acting like they haven't been hearing it. But every time we do a show or we do a program, all of a sudden it's a flurry, it's a flood, a plethora of experts about where we are relative to that. But they don't want to give the proper acknowledgement so we can move forward and get and do what? Cooperate. I've done 13 years as on a board of directors at a cooperative, a local cooperative here in Atlanta. After president, and know the navigation. This is not even in conjunction with, because King was underground. When I was doing that, he was underground. He was doing the work, getting the work done, but I was in the matrix. I'm stuck in the matrix trying to maintain, because see, though I walk through the valley of death, I am death. So therefore there's no fear, of what could be happening to me. You're going to take my life, or death is going to be one of those alternatives for me not being here? No, you can't kill what's already dead. And dead meaning that it's no longer touchable by these limitations of that which is the martyrdom that happened with those who actually gave their life and sacrificed their lives.
Kimis. Yeah, Mikuak, that's a layout of that cradle of civilization, and you see those pieces. That's where a vast majority of the original people came from, those areas, and you can see it all comes together. If you look at it, it seems like it goes together like a puzzle. If you put it together, you can see it goes together like Pangea. But those are the pieces, right? So you have this one coast side, the Pacific coast side. Okay, this Pacific coast side is where you see Mu in there. You see South America. So the Nuwbuns or the Olmecs, they built from the lower part of South America and what is called Chile, all the way up that coastline, all the way up to Canada. They established all of that. Okay, now, and everything on the opposite side. Okay, then they get up to Canada. They come down on the Atlantic coast side, where you get into the sides where from New York all the way down that coastline, down into Florida, into the Caribbean. That's the trajectory of their development for the initial establishment. So you had Mu, and then obviously Lemuria. Like even now, when you look at the sunken archipelagos in between Fiji, like the island of Fiji, if you look at the island of Fiji, in between Fiji and Hawaii, you'll notice that big continent we see in the middle called Mu is there. They already done uncovered it. They got Lemuria, all of that right up in that middle. Like if you go out there, the island of Fiji, and you go down, because all the secrets are in the oceans.
That's right.
All the secrets are in the water. Well, now they found all of the sunken archipelagos, the cities from Detroit. So you see like from Asia, the South Pacific over there in Japan, from Japan all the way around on that whole side, they got the same step pyramids there in Cambodia. They got the same step pyramids in the Caribbean, all the way around. Just like I said, the same step pyramids and the same culture, the same establishment The same technology. That's called Solartron. That right there is called Solartron technology. So you notice that the Olmecs, the Anunnaki, the Sumerians, they had the same technology. Now you notice that that's not in Kemet. You notice that you don't find that in Kemet, in Africa. You find that in the Americas, throughout the Americas, and you find that in Mesopotamia. You cannot find that in Kemet because they were on a different technology. And I've been telling people for years, okay, that right there is, this is what they call them the Lamanites, like the Mormons call them the Lamanites, it's like, yeah, but you see the Lamanai, but you tell who the Lamanites were. They were Nuwbun people, and that lineage and that birthright and that bloodline obviously is in Belize. They built there as well, and you see the facial features. Those were not Mayans. They say, oh, these are Mayan ruins, but obviously those are not Mayan. Those are Nuwbun Olmec people. And a lot of people have had problems with that. That's an example of the Disney stealing X-Men, stealing the Olmec helmets, and putting it in their X-Men cartoons and comic books. This is something that they have been doing for many years. They already know about this knowledge and this science. These are Freemasons who have these secrets. I've been telling people this for years. So that's the X come from the Shi, XI. It's like the Shi clan dynasty. Those were the original people who established all of the stuff on this planet pretty much in its original form. The records and the history is there, but they're bringing it out now, and everybody is just trying to claim bits and pieces of it. So I've been telling people for years, I've been following it, following everything that Stan Lee was doing, everything Disney was doing, everything that Jack Kirby was doing, everything that Joseph Smith was doing. All of these people, all of these guys were Freemasons. Walt Disney was a Freemason. Him and Joseph Smith, where they get this information from? They got this information from Chicago. Both of them. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormons religion. And then you have Walt Disney, who's also from Chicago. If you do some history and research on them, you'll notice that they was getting all of this science, the Shi science, from where? Chicago. Look at
Chicago, that's right. That's right.
All right. So that, now this is Wakanda. This is a mound. This is Wakanda Mound, the Jaguar Mound in Wisconsin. So that where they get the Jaguar from, they got the Jaguar and Wakanda from here in the Americas. There's no such thing as Wakanda in Africa. That's a false narrative that spawned. It became a fictional place in the movie, and there are no Panthers and there are no Jaguars in Africa either. They stole all of this culture and this legacy from the Americas, and they put a false African spin on it. Okay, that right there is Kansas, the historical place, and that's Wakanda in Kansas. So you see the Wakanda Lake to the right, and then you see the story of Wakanda, of Princess Wakanda, and that's the same name that my granddaughter has. Just for the record.
So real quick, The Wizard of Oz, obviously, Frank Baum, placed in Canada. Canada, what am I saying? Kansas, right? So that story, very interesting, right? The Wizard of Oz, or ounces, gold, resources, etc. Go back to the Mesopotamian legends of gold and risk and the whole process.
The yellow brick road.
Yellow brick road, exactly. So very, very interesting.
The poppy seeds, and, all that. All that is, of course, wrapped up in the story of Wakanda.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing is, like, just so we can bring closer to that, the mounds there. All right, now they get the Wakanda River. The Wakanda basically means spirit waters. Okay, now in these waters, that's why they had a number of Wakandas. because it was about the spirit of the entities, the jaguars and our people in those waters, whether they was underneath mounds or whether they was underneath pyramids. They would say Wakanda, the spirit waters, the energy, the spirit of the ancestors would be in these waters, in these territories, in these locations.
That
So
Jaguar science. Go ahead. That Jaguar, we're in that wizard wave spell because we want to make sure we correlate that we are flowing within the alignment of that which is the Olmec Nuwbun science and cosmology and calendrics. We're not just speaking to it because it's coming out now and we have this conversation. Everything is happening in synchronic order, serendipitously and very much synchronic. So that's why it's important that the King is also now dropping that science about the origins and the correlations and the co-opting, and to make it and to replace it into something else that doesn't really fit, so we can be able to have a displaced feeling about where we are.
exactly. Yep, that's it. So yeah, we have National Treasure, Book of Secrets. People, we encourage the audience to get that movie, and you'll notice that that movie is about these treasure hunters finding the Olmec city of gold in the Americas.
Right.
And then you see below it, you see the Olmec glyph, and in the city of gold that they found. And then the whole story, and it was all about them. The UK, they was in the UK and Buckingham Palace, got in the Queen's desk, and then they started to put together these dates and getting these planks. And that plank to the right is with the pyramids or the Olmecs. All this stuff is real history that they put in a movie that Disney and them had access to since the 1800s.
Right. And it's also interesting to point out how Disney has its own autonomy in the state of Florida.
Right. Because that's where they get the whole idea of the whole royalty, the whole prince thing, the autonomy, the kingdom, empire. They get all of that from this stuff right here. That's what Walt Disney, he was a Mason. He was Freemason. So they had secrets and they had all of this information in these lodges. And then they started disseminating the information and making money off of it. That's why all of them that come out, it's just history of this that they're putting in people's face. Look at the new movies with the Black Panthers. Look at all the black superheroes, because they know the history and the prophecy tells them that it's going to be a time period where these black people or these black superheroes, these black jaguars are going to come and reclaim what's theirs and showing their superpowers in these times. That's why they're putting it out.
So speak about the pyramid.
Remember, when you're Freemasons, and those of you who are out there may be under those initiations, you know well that you're considered a builder. Same with when they talk about those who are the Freemasons and who actually are the builders of that which is the falsehood that we see now. But they're also the protectors of the secrets, to the degree that your initiation keeps you bounded or bonded into not telling or revealing the secrets. Yes, you see, because that's part. Because Solomon was one of the major builder, because that's what the Son of Man. The idea around that was to protect that which is now becoming revealed. Because it doesn't mean because it's secret it doesn't be revealed. Secret means what the word implies. It secretes. It comes out slow but sure. It's secretions. Before you know it, it's going to reveal itself, and that's what we find ourselves right now with King giving us the manifestation. What you see now, what you're seeing displayed for you, is the secrets becoming fully revealed and exposed, because the secretions are no longer being held. It can't be held any longer.
Yes, sir.
Talk about the pyramid we see on the screen right now in the upper left. Looks like it's underwater.
That's a pyramid that they found in 2001 in Cuba. Okay, the underwater, and they said for it to be to the place to where it is right now, they have carbon dated it as 11,000 years. Okay, in Cuba, and that's underneath the ocean. And obviously, that Miami, Florida, and Cuba is very close. So that tells you that there was a step pyramid civilization in between America, because Cuba was once a part of America before it slightly started separating. But that Caribbean, these are the same step pyramids, and this is a portion of what they call Atlantis. Now, if you look at the times and the dates, they still don't know how old it is. They just saying on the surface it's 11,000 years. 11,000 years right there in the ocean in between Miami, Florida, and Cuba.
Bananas.
You know what I'm saying? And then go back, you know, the one to the right.
Okay, oops, let me.
One to the right is in Japan. And that's Yonaguni, which is very similar. The same thing. Remember, I was telling you about them building on that Pacific coast? Now, okay, this is the one to the left is on the Atlantic coast, and the one to the right is on the Pacific coast.
Come on.
Like I told you.
Had them everywhere. And the ones on the bottom, those are other reflections.
Right. So you see the one in the middle, they say necropolis, right? Okay, that's in Egypt, but that was a pyramid by Zoser. Yeah. Okay, now you look at the left in Central America, obviously, and then you look to the right, it's the one that's Cambodia. But you notice that they're all step pyramids.
Come on.
When I told everybody that the original builders on this planet for several thousands of years were step pyramid builders. Now that pyramid in the middle is older than those three pyramids they talk about in Giza. That pyramid in the middle is a replica of the pyramids in the Pyramid Valley in Peru that Zoser was responsible for. And that's an image of Pyramid Valley. And you see the same step pyramids, and that's a satellite image of the step pyramids that are older than even that pyramid we just saw in Necropolis. And that's on that Pacific coastline in Peru.
Right.
You see?
All you can do is shake your head, right? Because the truth is proof and the positive of what it is. And then you see the correlation. And as we continue to speak about this and King elucidates, you know, because we're talking about intimidates or times and dates or elucidates the information, you're going to see where you're going to realize, you know, that a lot of what you're now seeing is that which is the uncovering of that which is developed versus which is underdeveloped, and why it's more developed in these regions where the Americas is more developed than Africa, and not because the colonizers went over and just underdeveloped Africa. I know that Walter Rodney said how Europe underdeveloped Africa, but they didn't speak about the development of the disparity between Africa and here based on the continental drift or the continental divide.
And the difference in the technology, like the culture, like when we talk about necropolis, that the Nuwbuns was there. And then when they talk about underneath the underworld and the Sphinx and all of that, okay, now when you get to that culture in Giza, that culture originated in the Yucatan. And people don't really know that because they haven't studied it that in depth yet. But it's going to come out that all of that culture was given to them, and they had a queen they call her Queen Mu. If you pull up Queen Mu, you'll see that culture came from Queen Mu. She was sent over there to help them establish that Kemetan or Egyptian culture that they was talking about. Now back to this. Okay, this is right here in Georgia. Now, if you go to the Etula, you know what I'm saying? You see the Etula, Etula, and then you see Etowah. Etowah comes from the word Etula. Now, the word Etula and Tula means motherland in the Nuwbun Olmec language. So they call this the motherland, not Africa. Tula. And you have Tula, 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 and you have Etula, Tula. That means motherland. Okay, and then you have Utla, Utla, which is where the word Atlan came from for the Atlanteans. Okay, but you see the Olmec writing is in the pyramid mounds right here in Georgia, just above where I am, with the Olmec writings, and they saying, oh, the Georgia kings had crowns of the Mayan kings.
Mayan God,
I
that's
thought
right.
they were, yeah, or the Mayan gods. I thought you said that they were nowhere except for Central America. It's a whole world of things in a whole city. You know, that's just right here above me and south of me down by Okmulgee. This whole thing was a part of that empire of the Nuwbuns, and it's being revealed every day. And I got layouts and maps of all of this stuff.
And let's make sure we distinguish between Maya and Mayan. See, that's
Mhm.
where, there have been compromised into believing that they're talking about our people. Mayan is not something that is identified as the cosmic order of the Maya, because the Maya was the illusion. That's what Maya means, illusion. And to create the confusion to allow for the dispersing of Olmec Nuwbun around the planet. So therefore, the bait and switch was to give you Mayan, while those who were actually always on the run, always moving,
Mhm.
uncatchable, never surrendered, never gave in, because they were always on the move, and they
And
kept navigating. Go ahead.
let me say something about that. All right, the word Mayan. All right, everybody should know by now that the word Mayan is a Hindi term
Right.
that came from the Hindus. Obviously, that wasn't their original name either. Their original name was C. Bonet. C. Bonet was the original, what they call the original Mayans. Now you can find many of their things in Cambodia, and you can find many of their things on the Atlantic coast in the Caribbean also. The C. Bonet. They were the original before being called Mayans. When the Hindus, they called them Mayans because they disappeared, basically disappeared overnight. And one of the reasons why they did was because they was doing a lot of human sacrifices that the Nuwbuns didn't like. So what the Nuwbuns did, they loaded them up, the Siboney, on ships, and they shipped them to Cambodia and parts of the Caribbean. That's why they became known as Mayan, which means illusion, because nobody could figure out where they had went. Because they disappeared. The Nuwbuns had took them from the Americas and over into those areas in Cambodia, and I got evidence of that as well. And that's another part of history that they don't cover.
So speak about Queen Mu, which we put this image up there on the screen.
All right. Well, Queen Mu, she was obviously from the Nuwbun Empire here, and it's a guy named Augustus Leplogion. All
Mm-hmm.
right, Augustus Leplogion, he was a Mason that wrote about Queen Mu, because what he did was he came from the UK. He was a Freemason that came from the UK, and he went into the Yucatan. And when he started to go into the Yucatan, he was going into the pyramids, and what he uncovered was the language hieratic and the story of Queen Mu and all these different things that was on the walls in the Yucatan. And he started to compare the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and the language was called hieratic. So the Nuwbuns had the language hieratic here in the Americas, and it told the story of how Queen Mu assisted them with developing and building, and how Tahuti was an Atlantean here in the Americas, and how he was sent over there to set things up to assist them with developments in Africa, or what was called Tamaray at the time, before being called Kemet. And the word Tamaray just mean beloved land. And Tamaray was here in the Americas, while people are now saying that Egypt was in America first, because it actually was here first before being developed and established in Africa.
So that perspective is definitively turning the out of Africa narrative on its head, basically. Like
Exactly.
that's what we are recovering now. through this remembering process, through this recapitulation, revealing process.
Yes, sir.
Unveiling.
Unveiling.
Mhm.
Revealing.
That's it. So
Yeah,
it's it's so much to go along with it. So we just
absolutely. Well, I mean, I know we've been at this for a few hours at this point. I had no doubt that we would go that long, but I certainly want to give a big up to the folks in live chat who are still with us, and they're following right along, having a great conversation. So
Yes,
big
sir.
respect to those hanging in there with us. And I trust that everybody is deriving some value from what is being shared tonight in this conversation. Again, today being the first day of a new wave spell process, a new creative cycle. This is just incredible. Let me see what we see.
It's
Sun,
more
sun, sun.
credible than,
It's
than any.
incredible, and it's credible all at the same time. And you know, with that, I just want to say I gather that we're going to need to do a recap here sometime over the next few moons as we do approach this golden intersection of timelines. I want to pull this up for our audience because, as you both know, the work in Ruben's absence, I'll just say the work he and I have been doing is really bringing emphasis to this calendrical, mathematical effective point 190 days away from today. So the countdown is certainly on, and we've been holding the space at this point for 26 weeks. This is our 27th episode. So we, as I said at the top of the episode, are kicking in the second half as we're bringing a proper orientation for our viewers, folks tapping in, doing their own research. Having you on tonight was very, very important and significant. I want to thank you, Wanique, for suggesting it initially when you were on episode 19. We had that great conversation with you. That was Ruben and I in that case. And that episode, in fact, we were covering the subject of ancient futures, reclaiming time, memory, and destiny. And so that we could bring forward here 8 episodes later, the systems change, synchronicity, and the mother culture. This was just really a very important introduction, I think, for many people, because what you've been sharing with us tonight is going to be new information, I'm sure, for many people tapping in, or maybe they've heard about it from an instant expert on a TikTok clip from somewhere else, who found your information and then repackaged it and presented the facts to them tonight, or at some experience they had on TikTok or IG. But in any case, we know that this is not an add water, instant oatmeal scenario. In your case, you've been at this for decades at this point. And I just want to, again, take the time to thank you for taking the time to be with us. And thank you, Baba Wanique, for insisting and inviting King Etznab to bring his presence into this space. And again, for those tapping in, tuning in online on the live chat, big up to all of you. And our brother Ruben, who I trust is navigating the power outage there in Mexico. He's in the land. He's down there in the Yucatan right now, on that, very near that East Coast, in that very, very rich and in-depth land that holds many secrets,
Yes, sir.
many levels of reality. And so we know.
And that's also just quickly interject this. When we talk about Mexico or Mexico, right? The Mishi, of course. We also talk about even the old Mex, or the old Mexicans or the original Mexicans.
Yeah.
It's all that's unearthed in the spell of words. And the way that things are hidden right before our very eyes, or hidden in plain sight. So therefore, we can see how we decode and decipher. And when we start decoding and deciphering, and then also take the language and therefore dispel it or unspell it, put it into this point where it's now putting you in a sense of a trance, then you begin to really understand the dance, that is taking place, the abundance, that happens in terms of what we need to do, the aboon, the Nuwbun, the aboon dance, and that is part of what we represent in terms of manifestation of the finest information. And you say, as we go into this next wave spell, as we transition and transform and transpire, there's nothing that, can go up against what is also the truth. That's why the sword of truth is sharp on both sides. The sword of truth, once it happens, it happens. You know, it's nothing going to stop it from happening. You know, because the sword of truth is here to be able to cut away all the fake illusions, but no, nothing personal. You know what I'm saying?
Nah.
If you get sliced by it, then you're in the way of that which is the Samron, which is back to the original owners of that which is our journey, our sojourn. The sojourn that even goes so far as to talk about when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was talking about the Asiatic black man, you know, and when he was actually just saying that there's nothing about Africa that we should claim because we were not African in that sense. Malcolm knew that too. So how did Malcolm, even though he still respected and loved the fact that Elijah took him out of that, why was it that Elijah decided that he was going to send Tanina Muhammad to where? To Mexico, to what? To Yucatan or to Palenque, to unearth the science, and talk about the original vibration. Now, mind you, we also know there's a lot of cross contamination that happens, and that's just where you got to be careful because it's not cross pollination, but cross contamination of things that are being provided, and you have to know how to decipher and know how to use the serpent, to eradicate some of that, because some of that poison, that venom that comes out, confuses the larger aspect of what is being stated, and then it gives the impression that there's something that is not. And this is where we're here to represent the endlessness by death. There's nothing that you can truly defy that on this timelessness vibration that we're on.
Well said, as usual. Well articulated, for sure. Well, with that, brothers, I'm going to go ahead and bring this one to a close. I want to really, again, thank you both for taking the time to tap in and share the time space in the Galactic Spin podcast together with me. This is incredible. As we like to do also a quick factoring of our kin. I discovered last night, thanks to Michelle doing the quick math, that we make 250 together, the three of us. And if I'm not mistaken, kin 250. So that white electric dog.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That love, that activation, that bonding and service. Exactly. So, and the white direction, northern direction, as we all know, the three of us also come with that expression of the direction of refinement. And so just more of that, more resonance, more I was going to say royalty. I saw Tierra TPH put in the chat, loyalty. That's the quality of the dog, indeed. Oh, loyalty. I was going to say royalty, rap god royalty. That's what time it is. That's what we're talking about right now. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the moment just to tap in with a brief clip of some of your music. As we said, we indicated a little bit of that earlier on. I wanted to just give a little bit of this context to the listeners to really appreciate love this, and what better way than to bring some high resonance music into the mix. Let me go ahead and cue this up real quick because it's certainly worthwhile. And as we contemplate the 190 days to the golden intersection of timelines, I just want to drop a little snippet from the Rap God intro featuring the voice of none other than Dr. Malachi Z. York, also known as Atum Ray, from Tama Ray, Nuwbun, Olmec, Yamasee, Sudanese, otherworldly being. And I also want to acknowledge another synchronicity. As you notice, tonight's color has been green.
That's right.
Yep.
And a lot of this, which is coming in now, seeming like new transition or transmission, I should say, was actually initiated back in the 1960s when the initial encounter with the one known as Melchizedek occurred in the life of Dr. Malachi Z. York, and really began a journey inward, a very, very deep journey that we're all still navigating and spiraling through. And just really thanks to those forebears who've gone before us and opened the way. I would be remiss not to acknowledge that, because I know that's the truth and reality as that is concerned. So the Sons of the Green Light, well established things already that we're only now beginning to vibrate high enough to even begin to conceive. And so I just wanted to put that out there for folks tapping in. This is not an overnight success. This is the reality of decades and lineages worth of unearthing, as you said, of reclaiming, indeed. And that's really the nature of what this time presents us with. So in light of that, just enjoy this snippet. I want to drop this in real quick. Again, big up to the listening audience, and then we'll wrap up in a quick moment. But thank you, everybody, for tapping in out there, tuning in with the Galactic Spin podcast.
Whoa. Come on.
The indigenous people were mixed in with Hushen, right? And they produced what you call Native Americans. When you hear about a Native American and you see a person with a round face and two long straight braids, that's not the Native American, that's an Indian. You understand? That's an American Indian. But that's not a Native American. Native American will all match like that face, that statue man out there when you come in with that big round head and their big lips and that big nose. I wouldn't even be classified as Olmec. They're purer than me. It's what you mean, to be honest. But that's who they were. They were the indigenous people of this land.
Tawu Antu Jed Couture, Lihaza, Atum Ray, Mustalami.
Whoa. Come on.
The indigenous people were mixed in with Hushen, right? And they produced what you call Native Americans. When you hear about a Native American and you see a person with a round face and two long straight braids, that's not the Native American, that's an Indian. You understand? That's an American Indian. But that's not a Native American. Native American will all match like that face, that statue man out there when you come in with that big round head and their big lips and that big nose. I wouldn't even be classified as Olmec. They're purer than me. It's what you mean, to be honest. But that's who they were. They were the indigenous people of this land.
Tawu Antu Jed Couture, Lihaza, Atum Ray, Mustalami.
I love it.
Yeah. I just wanted to drop that. Más importante. Let's bring Brother Wanik back on the scene as well. Yeah, Baba Wanik, Ken 86. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that audio reference, the resonance of Dr. Malachi York's voice, and that particularly important acknowledgement, about the so-called Olmec.
1997, just so everybody will know, that was in 1997 when we was on Tamaray, and I had to get that. I had to do something with that, because when he said that, and he also had a Olmec head on the land at the time. That's why he said, they like he was talking about that Olmec head out there. He was referencing the head that he had out there on the land, because when you would come in to the land, he had it, in the corner, when you pull up, straight up helmet on the ground.
Oh, man.
Loving it, and they used to call me the Olmec guy, Anuki, the Olmec guy, on Tamaray back then. Yeah, those are great memories. Like you said, it wasn't anything I've ever experienced like Tamaray.
No.
It was like, once in a lifetime experience for sure. And I'm grateful to just continue the legacy of it all, and then just highlight the greatness, because a lot of people, they spend time wanting to tear people down and, and be disrespectful to people and their legacy and things of that nature, because like I said, they caught up in that time stop. So we want to make sure that we highlight the greatness, the great works that has been done, for all the chosen ones throughout the world. And every chosen one that I know of is always chastised, always ridiculed, and they assassinate the character. And I say all of the insults, that people provide are disguised as concern. And I'm like, on that note, Wadnig, your turn. Lay it out.
You're muted, Wanik.
Yeah, I was talking to myself, rehearsing what I was going to say. I just have to say Om. You got to get the Oms to that, But I want to also state, that as an underscore, there's nothing much more to be stated or said. Had we been given a little more of the clock time, we would have been able to expand as always, because it's so much, it's so expensive. But I want to say, and maybe I know that maybe
not enough time, Wanik. You kidding me? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
That's what I'm saying. That's that vessel of intimidation, right? In times and dates, right? But I think that the importance of what we're talking through, I was going to say, is that I'm sure there's some questions and concerns or some points of reference that may have come to the chat, and we can carry that over into the IWB.coop website. If you have any questions or comments or points of concern, or you want to, provide some of the, appreciations or appreciate love, whatever, you can do that on that particular site. There are spaces and places for that in the blogs sections and that kind of thing, because we welcome that. Of course, King welcomes that, welcomes, whatever you want to put up against what he has provided, because like Honorable Muhammad said, don't condemn a dirty glass, put a clean glass beside it. And a dirty glass will condemn itself. So the whole thing that we want to do is be able to manifest that which is not pure, undiluted mathematics and wisdom from the actual and solar facts of the world. So we want to be able to manifest that. So I think that it has been done and demonstrated. This is a good impetus. And as you said, there's going to be more to happen or have that more, flow. It's going to happen in its own natural, divine, numerical science, and we don't have to really, plan anything, because that's why we're on the planet. It's already been planned.
Already planned.
Plan ET, the extraterrestrial plan. We're already in it. We're in it because it's a spin, right? We're in the spin of it. Therefore, we give thanks, for the wisdom of the elders and the ancients.
Yes, absolutely. In Lakesh Alakin, everybody out there, be sure to follow up with the Indigenous Water Bank website, iwb.coop. Link is in the live chat. Link is also in the show notes. If you want to follow up with King Etznab's incredible music, High Resonance, link is also in the show notes to find him on the #1 music platform, where he ranks high on multiple categories there, and we certainly know he's got a lot of listeners. I know he's sort of shared with me that a lot of listeners are a lot of lurkers. They kind of lurk around and listen, don't necessarily share the joy that they receive from their high resonance experience. But that's all right. We understand everybody's timid at this time in the spin of the time and dates that you were mentioning before. Everybody's feeling some intimidation. But I understand people feeling timidity, but it's also true you're hearing knowledge that you may not have heard before, and you're also getting it from a primary source. And I think that's very important to take into consideration before you just decide to discard anything you've heard tonight offhand. I don't advise you do that, actually. I advise that we all would do ourselves a deep service by doing our inner work. Doing our introspection. If there's anything you heard,
doing diligence.
Do your due diligence, and also do your shadow work. Do your internal work in that deep psychosis, because people have been ridiculed. They ridicule us, but this society has been very ridiculous in the sense that they have repeatedly caused us to ridicule and doubt ourselves. So you want to double, triple check in your own center for what you heard tonight, because at first here it might challenge your ego, it might challenge your own worldview or how you even see yourself. But I'm sure
challenge your misguided loyalty to those who have been established as those disseminating information that's contrary to what we're saying. And all due respect, that may well be the major resistance, is to see how you just oppose that which now contradicts what you have as an established order or established work or research from a Pan-African standpoint. So I know that is very upsetting.
and that also, but yeah, I mean, I guess in the sense that if you are a Pan-African who happens to be in a melanated body, that is a journey for you as well. I don't know how many Pan-Africans there are out there not, but I do know we have people out here listening that are probably hearing things that they haven't heard that don't even have a Pan-African orientation to what we're talking about. I'm talking about people who are hearing something that aren't coming from communities that we're normally maybe addressing.
Mhm.
Although, because the nature of this is to actually expose and open up to an international scale, I really do, again, want to extend the invitation to people who I did see in the chat, some people processing things that they were hearing, and one of the symptoms of that is usually a spiritual bypass, meaning we want to go past what we're hearing because what we're hearing doesn't make us feel good. But the wisdom right now is go in the direction of what feels uncomfortable.
Right.
Because that's where you're going to have your breakthrough. If you want to stay in the same time loop that props up white supremacy, then continue to, go in the direction you might choose to go in without taking a second consideration. But I'm really inviting you to breathe deep into this because, again, people are hearing new knowledge. And I'm saying that for you guys as well, because this is a different audience than maybe what we're all otherwise used to engaging as well. I mean, this work has been reaching, as you in various ways, we reach a broader audience.
Far reaching.
Yeah, and it's a tiny planet, but there's a lot of allies out here. And so we want to also encourage them, not discourage. We want to encourage them because I know we might not really, it doesn't matter to you, King Etznab, what people choose to do.
Right.
But that could also sound or feel or come across as dismissive as opposed to actually more relatively embracing the fact that people have been completely run amok, hoodwinked, and all the other various allegories we might apply to it. People have been deeply misinformed. Deeply.
Yes, they have. I want to say something to close out on that.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an open port to unity. It's about being cooperative, but it's ultimately always going to be left up to the individual.
Yeah.
And what we're saying, obviously, it's going to challenge a lot of people who feel like they have to have the need to be right. See, when you feel like you have the need to be right,
you're going to get left.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's what we're trying to help people avoid.
Exactly.
And that's why we have been doing this episode for 27 episodes up to now, because this golden intersection of timelines is an eye of the needle moment. So whatever people want to let go of, now's the time to shake it free, let go of it, whatever the preconceived notions are, because you can't take it into the next density. It's not going to fit. That's why you got to pack light. Only light will do at this point.
Travel light, that's right.
Travel light and get that internal light to dispel your own shadows. And that goes for all of us. We all got the shadow work to do, etc. But I just want to offer that encouragement for folks that it's all love. And it's what was something that was said in the song we used in the promo for the show. It's deeper than love.
Deeper.
Right?
Deeper.
So it's love and deeper than love. Another Rap God Royalty #1 smash.
That's
So go check for that. Look it up. You'll find it. Deeper than love. And, again, we're going to have you all forward on a future episode because it's that important. And we want to make sure we can encourage some folks, and I'll lead by example. I'm certainly aligning myself to become a member and shareholder of the Indigenous Water Bank, because the only way to really navigate this is from within. It's an inside job, metaphorically and literally, what's happening right now. And to be in the private is to also be on the inside. Okay.
Exactly. You got that right. And that's like you say, with people that are mystics and people who, as they say, God operate in mysterious ways from the private sector. Like I always tell people, where the greatest things occur, it's always in privacy and in seclusion. If you ask yourself the question, if you're a religious individual, you into Christianity or anything, the first thing you learn is God operate in mysterious ways, and you don't know what God gonna do. And that's how you need to move.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Instead of trying to go out and put an ad in the paper and tell everybody what you're gonna do before you do anything. You don't need to
Right.
move like that. You know what I'm saying? Because that's not sacred wisdom. They operate as mystics. They still trying to figure out how all of these things was built, and what kind of technology they used, and the level that they was on, and how did they know the blue storm year was going to be this year, and it was going to be the wild and stormiest year we've seen.
Come on.
How do you know? Like, who knew that thousands of years ago? Okay, we're in the year of the blue electric storm, and look at the stormy year that we've had, and it's still
So
going on, and you can't explain how somebody knew that many thousands of years ago.
Mm-mm. And I'll say this, the rhythmic storm is about organization and balance. And so where we find ourselves is getting organized and balancing. And this is a part of that. And very soon we're going to enter that resonant seed year. And that's an even a further turning of the dial and a raising of the vibration that is opening the way for this golden intersection. And the reason I keep going back to that is because on October 14th and 15th, we complete 13 tunes since the closing of the cycle, where I was there with Juanique physically in the Yucatan at Chichen Itza, Temple of Kukulkan, December 21st, 2012. Now, this marker, October 14th, is when the Mayan long count, the indigenous long count, reaches 13.0.13.0.0. So December 21st was 13.0.0.0.0. So we're literally completing 13 tunes, tuning up at a frequency pitch of 13 since completing the closing of the cycle.
Right.
So that brings us into this new time in such a way where we're at a particular harmonic node or layer, and that's what that date. It also coincides with the 443rd anniversary of the Gregorian calendar, at which point the calendar reaches a sum of 161,803 days. And for, as our listeners, they understand, that's a fractal of the golden ratio, 1.61803. So literally, you have the golden intersection of timelines. Like, that's why it's referred to as that. So this illuminating, insightful information is all, I would say, part of that which is being drawn to the center.
Right.
And this is something.
if I may, Baba Mikuak,
Uh-huh.
if I could, if you're closing out, I know you're waning into cause we already had a crescendo, right? We already had a crescendo. There's already
No, we good. Yeah, we're wrapping up.
the highest peak in terms of that. But I want to, if I may, to support people in moving through the storm and to understand, and decoding what the storm represents. I would like to provide something for the storm and with the rhythm and what they are working through. Most of us believe that we're in 2025, and that's the extent of it based on the Gregorian, fallacious way of identifying time. Which is, of course, the correlation, but in the ephemeris and how we calculate through the cosmic order and the galactic order is to be able to understand the definition of what it means to be in the storm year based on where we are in the calculation of that, which is the Gregorian timeline. Because that timeline is already in the mystical way, and the mystics was already in the Masonry, Freemasonry, in the secret society, they did not in a vacuum create the Gregorian calendar. It was very much deliberate.
Oh, yeah.
But they know in that the real science is based on the light, not the shadow of what the Gregorian calendar, the colonial calendar of conquest that I speak of. But I want to be able to provide, if you're really closing to the degree, I want to provide one last narrative to understand what the storm represents, so you can understand what you're experiencing. Even if you don't have full knowledge and awareness of it, you should be able to understand it. That's why we offer GPSs, the Galactic Purpose Signatures, so you can understand how you factor into that. What's your destiny cross in moving through this particular divine time that we're in. So if I may, I'll yield to you. If too much in terms of time, I won't.
No. Let's go for it. Let's go for it.
So the storm, is one of nature's purest expressions of energy. The impact of the storm reaches everyone, commanding respect and humility. Yet the roots of the storm are humble. Simple drops of water, precipitation from the sea gathers until it combines with the force of the wind into something mighty and transformative. This is a lesson for us if we wish to embrace storm energy. Seek the center of the storm. Be calm. whilst all around you changes. Be still whilst all around you transforms. The stronger the storm energy, the more important it is to stay centered. When you stay centered without apparently acting, you will be able to catalyze great changes. Just as the storm returns to the sea, be self-generating. Be responsible for your energy, and great things are possible with the storm. Lose your center, and you might find yourself getting drenched. The affirmation I'm going to say it in triplicate or thrice so everybody can really calibrate themselves into the vibration. I'll say it 3 times, and just open and receive and allow yourself to have a sense of resonance of what I'm going to provide as an affirmation for the archetype, the solar seal, the sun glyph of Mikuak, the storm. I self-generate freedom of energy, energy of freedom. I self-generate freedom of energy, energy of freedom. I self-generate freedom of energy, energy of freedom. Not to negate the fact that the vibrational tone that puts us in that level of resonance and coordinates is the rhythmic tone, which is the 6th tone, which we are all now vibrating from in this rhythmic storm. From the empowering of radiance, which is the 5th tone, comes the balance of equality, the 6th tone. Once again, we are faced with the challenge of finding equilibrium within oneself and in the different areas of one's life. Nature holds the perfect balance within the natural rhythm of life's cycles, and it is this which we must aim to integrate within our own daily realms or rhythms. This means organizing our lives in such a way that allows us to stay in balance within ourselves, within the realms of work and of play, as well as in all our relations. There is a natural equality which exists at the core of all balancing acts, and which can only be attained by journeying inwards, the inside job, to find the source, so you are, see, of true equilibrium within.
Right, no place like Om, y'all. And we know Om is where the heart is, right here.
Yes.
So thank you, Baba Wanique. Share with folks real quick as well where they can also follow up with you, and I'll put it in the show notes, but also for folks that want to tap into their GPS.
WaniqueShabazz.com.
Okay, that's WaniqueShabazz.com. WaniqueShabazz.com. I'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well for folks that want to tap in with you. And also for you, King Etznab, Shaquan L. Ray, copyrighted, by the way. Ken 38, let it be known.
Admin at iwb.coop. That's admin at iwb.coop, or King L. Ray at iwb.coop. That is the coordinates. Tune in and win.
Tune in and win. That's what I'm talking about. That's all. That's what we need.
Because that's where you get your kin.
Come on, that is
in the Galactic Spin.
Hey, come on now, y'all be knowing, y'all be on it. I love it. Y'all are so funny. But we go back and we go forth. We go forward. We give great thanks. Big ups to all those hanging tough with us tonight in the live chat. You've had quite a few people here sticking in for the whole 4 hours, so that's remarkable. So big ups and big love to all of you. Take this great energy forward in your path. Share this love with others. Let folks know about the Galactic Spin podcast. Let folks know about the co-op, iwb.coop, that is. Let folks know about Wanique Shabazz at waniqueshabazz.com. Get your GPS and get your membership with this co-op model There's nothing like it. And this is the future, really and truly. Both you brothers, I give great thanks to your ancestors that made it possible for you to be here, and certainly to my ancestors made it possible for me to be here, that we could join in this collaborative, cooperative effort today together, right?
Yes. World Bridge Media.
You know how we do. World Bridge Media, better together. And especially shout out to our team, the 260 team, our 260 pod, Ruben Llináa, 113, Michelle Esta, Kin 16, Alejandra, Kin 5, and yours truly, Kin 126, our 260 pod. We give great thanks to all of you out there tapping in. Stay in your light. Be good to yourself. Be good to each other. All right? Thank you, everybody. One love in Lakesh.
In Lakesh.
Alakin.
Tune in with the Galactic Spin podcast and expand your view. Galactic Spin podcast and expand your view.